This is Audible.
Audible Studios presents His Dirty Little Secret, Book 1 of his Secret series. Written by Terry Ann Browning, performed by Carly Robbins and Jacob Morgan.
1. Ash. The rain was coming down like big fat teardrops, straight from heaven. I glared up at the sky, hating the weatherman for promising clear skies for the entire week. Because of him, I'd left my umbrella at home along with my coat. Instead, I had dressed for a cool autumn day in jeans, a hoodie, and my favorite pair of Converse. The ones that I'd been holding on to since I was 16. The ones that had a hole in the right sole. Now, as I raced from my car to the nearest entrance of the skyscraper that was my ultimate destination, I felt like a drowned rat. My clothes clung to me, my hair soaked through even with the hoodie up, and my feet were wet and cold, making a loud squishy sound as I ran. Squishy was the ultimate gross out for me. The word, the sound, the feeling. Everything about it made me shudder. Yet there I was, soaked and squishy. Barf. Someone held the door open, and I called a thank you from over my shoulder as I hurried past them. The lobby was cool, because despite it being November, the AC was still blasting. Any other day, I would have been perfectly happy for the frigid temperature, but today, I felt frozen all the way to my bones. As I rushed through the ground floor, I went through the metal detectors, but unlike everyone else, I bypassed the security desk. No one blinked an eye as the homeless-looking chick, me, hurried toward the bank of elevators. They were used to me showing up, and knew better than to stop me, even if I was in clothes that looked like I had gotten them from Goodwill, while everyone else was in expensive suits, handmade Italian leather shoes, or heels that could have paid my rent for 3 full months. My teeth were chattering by the time I got to the elevator and punched the call button. Come on, come on. I knew that repeatedly hitting the button and cursing the damn thing was not going to get the metal box to move any faster. That didn't stop me from doing it, though, until I heard the distinctive ping, and the doors opened. I just wanted to get upstairs, get this day over with, then go home and fall into a nearly scalding bath to chase away the coldness that made my fingers numb and my feet ache. 12 people stepped off the elevator. It was lunchtime, but with the torrential downpour outside, I was surprised they hadn't opted to order in and eat at their desks. Once it was empty, I stepped in and stabbed the top button with a nerveless finger. 4 other people were waiting, but no one joined me, and I was completely okay with that. I was dripping all over the tiled elevator floor. My hair was dripping into my eyes, and a few drops clung to the end of my nose. I looked and felt gross. If I was lucky, I wouldn't catch a cold, but my luck had obviously run out for the day. As the elevator ascended, it made a few stops along the way. When the people waiting for the ride saw me standing in the corner, they quickly backed out, muttering to themselves that they would just get the next one. I barely paid them any attention, too used to that reaction from nearly everyone. They couldn't see beyond the comfortable clothes I opted to wear, or the terrifying scar across my neck. Rather than have to talk to the boss's freak of a sister, they avoided me like I had Ebola or some shit. I couldn't have cared less. I'd given up caring about what people thought of me years ago. The elevator came to a smooth stop, and the doors glided open. As I stepped off on the top floor, I was instantly assaulted by little arms wrapping around my legs, making me topple to the floor. The overhead lights blinded me as all 52 pounds of my godson landed on my stomach. His adorable smile was missing a front top tooth, making my heart do a painful flip-flop in my chest.
You're late, Aunt Ash.
It's pouring rain outside, Bud. I nearly drowned just walking across the street. I didn't try to get up. There was no use. I was going to be there as long as Jamie deemed acceptable. Now that I was face to face with the reason I was even out of bed on such a miserable day, I wasn't in such a hurry to get home again. I gave him an exasperated sigh when he just stared down at me. The things I do for the only man who owns my heart. Jamie rolled his dark eyes, making my heart do that flip-flop thing again. This kid owned me, and he knew it.
You're so dramatic sometimes, Aunt Ash.
All I could do was laugh at how grown up he sounded at times. I knew it was my own fault. I didn't talk to him like he was a little kid. I never had. From the first time he had been placed in my arms the day his mother pushed him into the world, we had bonded, and I hadn't felt right using baby talk, or even censoring myself around him like most people did. There was nothing I wouldn't do for this kid. Nothing. Jamie, get off your aunt. I lost the smile at the sound of the deep voice that could belong to no one but Jamie's father. Jamie lost his smile, too, when he saw that mine had disappeared with the arrival of his dad. The kid wasn't stupid. He knew there was tension between the two adults he adored. Lately, I had tried to hide my loathing for Sawyer Brannon, knowing that Jamie was starting to resent the man because I couldn't stand to be around him. It was hard to do when he caught me unaware like this, though. Jamie carefully got off me, and then offered me his little hand to help me up. I took it, and got to my feet, dusting off my wet pants as I did. Pushing my hood off my head, I shook out my long blonde hair. It was dripping wet, and I could already feel the effects of a cold trying to invade my body. "Damn it, Ash," Sawyer scolded. "What were you thinking? Going out without a raincoat or an umbrella?" Instead of answering him, I glanced at Jamie. "Got your stuff?"
It's in Dad's office.
But he didn't look like he wanted to leave me long enough to go fetch it. His dark eyes kept going from me to his father, his little shoulders tensing more and more with each passing second. "Well, go get it, Bud. I have work to do when we get home." I ran my fingers over his slightly shaggy dark hair. His mom always sobbed when he got his hair cut, but Jamie hated for it to get too long. So I was normally the one who had to take him. While his hair was dark like his father's, Jamie had gotten his mother's curls, making him look like an adorable mop when it got overly long. Sighing, he nodded.
Okay.
He shot his dad a hard look that would have had me laughing if I didn't feel so guilty for making their normally close father-son relationship so strained.
I'll be right back.
I watched as he walked past the receptionist, who was eating at her desk, down the corridor to where a huge glass-walled conference room was already full of CEOs having a working lunch. Sawyer's office was the last door on the left, while my brother Bryce's was the last on the right, with both their secretaries sharing the office across from the glass-walled conference room. I'd always thought it was an odd layout for the top dogs, but I also knew that my brother and his best friend liked to keep their CEOs on their toes. The luxury of their offices, however, made up for it. Jamie paused outside of Bryce's office, waved at him, then went into the other room to retrieve his backpack and coat. There would be a plush leather couch against one wall, where Jamie would sometimes nap after lunch, that went well with the huge mahogany desk, with Sawyer's Mac taking up only a small portion of the monstrous thing. Behind the desk, with that ridiculously modern chair that caught people off guard when they first saw how old-school traditional the rest of the office looked, thanks to Amber's talent at decorating, but being unable to convince him that he needed a more grown-up chair, was a breathtaking view of the city that Bryce and Sawyer had fought over when they had first bought the building. But it was the bookcase that always hit me like a physical blow, right to the heart. An entire wall of first editions Sawyer had collected, along with all the books Jamie enjoyed. The first time I had seen those expensive, leather-bound books beside the small, colorful picture books, I'd found myself melting a little. Melting for my best friend's ex-husband. It was wrong and heartbreakingly real. And I always left this place with my heart weighing me down, every single time I had to go into that damn office. Therefore, I stayed where I was, even though that meant Sawyer was right there with me, and tried to pretend that he didn't exist. "You're going to catch a cold, Ash. HR tells me that at least 10 people are out today with the damn flu." Sawyer practically growled at me from under his breath, so the receptionist didn't overhear him. I shrugged, forcing my eyes away from where I had last seen Jamie to finally look at Sawyer, like it did whenever I looked at him. My heart did that stupid flip-flop thing in my chest, making it ache twice as badly this time. I hated my reaction to just the sight of this man. Hated that the part of that damn organ, which had been reserved only for him, hadn't died when he had married my best friend. "A cold won't kill me," I told him, my tone neutral as always when I had to speak to him. "And I already got my flu shot. I took Jamie to get his. Remember?" It had taken a lot of practice to make sure I didn't betray myself by so much as a flick of my lashes, and how affected I was whenever he was close. No one had even suspected it had come close to killing me more times than I could remember. When Amber and Sawyer had been married, and I'd had to watch them together at parties and family gatherings. Everyone who saw them had said they were the perfect couple. The way Sawyer had seemed to cater to Amber's every need. How Amber had always looked at him like she had the entire world in the palm of her hand. When they had gotten a divorce, the world had been shocked, while I had breathed a small sigh of relief, knowing I wouldn't have to see her ex nearly as often. That relief had been short-lived, when I realized that I would still have to see him almost every damn day. I couldn't give up the chance to see Jamie. Sawyer and Amber shared custody, and I babysat Jamie every afternoon, so I had to see him practically every other day. He crossed his arms over his chest, making his suit jacket tighten over his biceps. I gritted my teeth, mentally chastising myself for noticing anything about him. It was hard, though. So damn hard. Sawyer had the kind of good looks that screamed, "Look at me." His dark hair was cut short, and the scruff on his face always looked at least a few days old. But I had always liked it. It made his dark eyes and slightly golden complexion stand out even more. He was 6'2" of lean muscles that I knew he spent at least an hour each morning keeping in meticulous shape. How many mornings had he woke me up at 5 to go for a run? Too many. And not nearly enough. Pushing back those painful memories of a time when I had thought everything in my life was perfect, I locked them away. I had no business thinking about what it had been like when Sawyer had been mine. He never really had been. I had just been too stupid to see that back then. A big tan hand lifted, his fingers grasping a dripping strand of hair and rubbing his thumb over it. My heart stopped beating for 5 full seconds, only to start racing. I swallowed hard and pulled back, forcing him to drop my hair. I saw his face darken, his forehead creasing. He watched me closely, his dark eyes trying to see past the 1,000-foot walls I had erected to protect myself from him. Once upon a time, he had been the only one who truly saw me. Now I would die before I let him see how vulnerable I really was.
"Ready,"
Jamie called as he ran back to us. I crouched down when he reached me, straightening his shirt and buttoning his coat. When he was all bundled up, I rubbed my nose against his. Jamie had just turned 5, but because his birthday was in November, he couldn't start kindergarten until the next year. Therefore, he spent his mornings in daycare downstairs. At lunchtime, Sawyer went down to eat with him, then brought him up to his office where either Amber or I would pick him up. This week was different, though, as would be the next, since Amber was out of town with her boyfriend Leo for the next 14 days. I would be picking Jamie up every day, which meant Sawyer was going to be stopping by my apartment every damn night to pick up his son. Perfect. Yeah, not so much. Straightening, I took Jamie's hand in mine. He was warm compared to my chilled body, but I didn't dare let my teeth start chattering in front of Sawyer. He muttered a curse under his breath and turned away. "Don't you dare leave yet," he called over his shoulder as he marched toward his office. I rolled my eyes at his commanding tone, but did as I was told. If it had just been me, I would have told the man to go to hell and been out of there in a flash. It wasn't just me, though. I was about to leave with his son. If he had something he needed me to take for Jamie, I would wait all day. Behind me, the elevator doors opened. Jamie and I both turned to watch a woman in a knee-length black skirt that seemed to have been spray-painted over her huge ass step off. She wore a red blazer over a white top that dipped low, far too low to be considered business attire. It showed off a pair of breasts that had probably cost her, or maybe her sugar daddy, a nice chunk of change. I grimaced at my inner musings, slightly ashamed of myself for judging this woman without knowing her, yet unable to help it. I wasn't sure how tall she was. With her heels, she was at least 4 inches taller than me. Without them, I was probably taller by at least a few inches. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a bun, but her makeup was anything but conservative. Her lips had so much lipstick on them, I wasn't sure if she had lip injections to get them that full, or if they were naturally like that. Her glasses didn't hide the fact that she had gone a little extra heavy with the smoky eye look, but from the blank look on her face, I wondered if she actually needed them, or if they were just an accessory. I wasn't normally one to dislike anyone at first sight, but something about her just rubbed me the wrong way. As the elevator doors closed behind her, she turned her head, her brown eyes taking in everything around her in one appraising scan. When they landed on me, her lips twisted with distaste, then unveiled disgust when she saw my scar. My dislike for her doubled. She quickly turned her gaze on Jamie, and the smile she gave him was so white, it could qualify as a floodlight. "Hi, Jamie," she greeted in a husky voice that sounded just as fake as the rest of her. "Is your daddy around?" It set my nerves on edge the way she seemed to talk down to him. Jamie didn't seem to appreciate it either.
My father is in his office, but he doesn't have time for your kind of crazy lady, he informed her in a tone dripping with all the contempt this woman had just shown me, and oozing with an attitude I had no one else to blame for but myself. I knew the responsible adult thing to do would be to chastise him for being rude. Amber would have gone through the roof at the tone her son was using with this woman. I wasn't Amber, and I sure as hell wasn't going to scold him when all he did was let this super fake woman with the mean girl mentality know he didn't like her. She lost her smile, making her look older and not nearly as pretty as she tried so hard to look. "You're not a very nice little boy. And you're a bitch," I told her before Jamie could open his mouth. "He still wins." Her brown eyes turned hostile. "I'm sure I don't care what a raggedy nanny thinks about me. Don't you have a job to do?" I almost laughed. Almost. This bitch didn't have a clue. The receptionist cleared her throat behind us, letting us all know that she had overheard everything. The older woman lifted her head, trying to put her fake smile back in place. "Hello, Leah. Can you let Bryce know I've arrived?" Leah, who had been working for my brother and Sawyer from day one and had always been cordial to every person who stepped onto the top floor, didn't return the other woman's smile. "Of course, Miss Prescott. I'll let Mr. Montgomery know." Pretty blue eyes trapped behind a pair of chic glasses turned to me, her smile returning. "Miss Montgomery, should I inform your brother you're leaving?" I didn't laugh when the not-so-lovely Miss Prescott paled under her layers of expensive foundation. I didn't smirk or even childishly stick my tongue out at her when her mouth fell open and she imitated a dying fish with the way her lips moved, but no words escaped. I wasn't that petty, after all. It didn't matter to me that now that this fake-as-hell woman knew I was Bryce Montgomery's sister, she was sorry for insulting me.
I was used to people talking down to me, only to try and kiss my ass when they realized I wasn't what I appeared. Once, that would have stung, but now it rolled off my back. My heart was so calloused and scarred from the past that it would take more than this mean girl wannabe to even come close to hurting my feelings. No, that's fine, Leah. As soon as Sawyer gets back, Jamie and I will have to go. I have a pile of work on my desk at home. I offered her a smile, appreciating her kindness. If Bryce comes to say goodbye, I'm liable to be here all afternoon. Sawyer came out of his office with his trench coat folded over his arm and an umbrella in his hand. I was already shaking my head before he reached me. No, Sawyer, I don't want your coat. I'll be fine. Jamie had his own umbrella. That was all that mattered. He ignored my protests as he walked past Miss Prescott, without even seeming to see her, and wrapped the trench coat around my shoulders. When I tried to pull away, he stepped closer, blocking me in. This close, I could see the faint gold flecks in his dark irises, could smell the subtle cologne that he had always worn, that I both loved and hated. Needing to be away from him, I quickly put my arms through the sleeves and pulled away from him. He offered the umbrella and I reluctantly took it. Anything just so I could get out of there.
Bye, Dad.
Jamie gave him a quick hug, shot Miss Prescott a hard glare that had her face filling with embarrassment, now that she was starting to get her thoughts together once again.
Bye, Leah.
Bye, Jamie, Leah called after him. He pressed the call button for the elevator, and the doors instantly slid open. I waited for Jamie to enter first, but before I could step inside, a strong hand caught my elbow. Even through the layers of clothing, I still felt scalded by his touch. I shot a quick glance at Jamie, who was waiting patiently so he could push the lobby button. Not wanting to upset my godson, I gave his father my full attention. "I'll be by around 7, he said, his eyes seeming to skim across every part of my face. When those dark eyes fell to my neck, something close to pain flashed through his eyes, making the gold flecks stand out a little more. I jerked my arm free, hating him a little more for feeling anything even resembling he was upset over my scar. Miss Prescott hadn't even fazed me by her nastiness, yet one little look from this man, and I felt destroyed. I didn't let him see it, though. I refused to be a weak, meek little kitten where this man was concerned. "He'll be ready. Ash." I stepped into the elevator. Memories of him saying my name like he just had, all low and needy, had always made me give in. I couldn't. Not now. Not ever. "Bye, Sawyer." Jamie pushed the button and the doors started to close, but not before I saw the look on Sawyer's face. The determination. The hunger. "See you soon, Ash."
2. Sawyer. The elevator doors closed on Ash and Jamie, but I still stood there, willing the doors to open again to give me another moment with Ash. It was becoming harder and harder to see her and keep my hands to myself. Seeing her so often was torture, one I knew I deserved. Raking my hands through my hair, I blew out a tired breath and finally turned away from the still-closed elevator. Leah pretended not to notice the dark look on my face and offered me a friendly smile as I moved around her desk and headed for my office. The receptionist saw everything. I knew she would take it all to her grave if needed. That loyalty was what got her a comfortable raise every year and a bonus that made everyone, including my own secretary, green with envy.
"Sawyer,"
a husky voice called from behind me.
"it's so good to see you again."
My mind still on Ash, I ignored the woman as I kept walking. I didn't have the time or the energy to deal with her. She wasn't the one I wanted. Wasn't the one who seemed to consume every waking moment of my life. Fuck, I missed Ash, and I had no one but myself to blame for not having her.
"Sawyer."
The voice sounded more demanding this time, almost whining, trying to force my attention to her. Even if I were attracted to Sharon Prescott, that whine would have turned me off then and there. She had been trying to entice me into her bed for weeks now, but I wasn't interested. Stopping at my secretary's office, I stuck my head in, causing both Janice and Kayla's heads to pop up from their computers. The office was huge, and we could have made it into two, easily giving them each a large workspace and privacy, but they had always liked working this way, and neither I nor Bryce had been in a hurry to do the remodel. Both women were in their mid-30s and married, and they enjoyed each other's company throughout the day. Janice was 6 months pregnant with her first child, though, and soon I would have to find a replacement for the woman who ran my days so smoothly. She wasn't planning on coming back once the baby was born. Depending on who took her place and if Kayla got along with them as easily as she did Janice, would determine if I put up that wall or not. "Hey, Jan, will you clear my schedule for tomorrow?" Her mouth dropped, her dark brows lifting in surprise at my request. In the last 10 years, I hadn't taken a single day off. Hell, I hadn't taken time off when I had gotten married or even for a honeymoon.
Are you sick?
I shrugged. The pain of missing Ash so much was a kind of sickness, I guessed. "Something like that," I muttered. "If something needs immediate attention, just pass it over to Bryce." Her brows still reaching toward the ceiling, she nodded.
Okay, boss man. I'll take care of it.
"Thanks," I called to her as I headed back toward my office. Bryce came out of his office before I was halfway to my own. His eyes, so much like his sister's, went first to the woman still standing by the reception desk, then to me. The irritation on his face matched my own, but unlike me, he had to be at least a little cordial with the woman. "Did I miss Ash?" he asked as he stopped in front of me. Despite myself, I glanced over my shoulder at the still closed elevator doors. Longing hit me like a Mack truck in the gut. Clenching my hands into fists at my sides, I nodded. "She was out in the damn rain with no coat or even an umbrella. She's going to get sick." "She'll be fine," Bryce dismissed. "She doesn't need a babysitter, Saw. She's a grown woman." I didn't need him to remind me of that. I knew more than anyone just how much of a woman Ash Montgomery was. I had been her first lover, the first man to explore her amazing body and learn what made her crazy with need. For 2 short months, she had been mine, and I hadn't wanted to share her with the world or even her career. Now I had to wake up every damn morning knowing I had thrown everything I could have had with her away. Oblivious to my inner turmoil, Bryce slapped me on the back as he passed. "Wish me luck that this is the last time I have to deal with Prescott's daughter," he said in a lowered voice. "She's getting on my last damn nerve, man." My lips twisted in wary amusement at my friend's ordeal. I wouldn't have traded places with him for $1 million. "Good luck. Maybe she won't try to assault you this time." Funny. Bryce turned to face me, walking backward. "I'll give you anything you want if you do this for me." It wasn't the first time he had made that offer, and like every other time, I shook my head. Wayne Prescott's daughter was on the hunt for a husband. When he had introduced the 3 of us at a charity event back in August, the woman had nearly swooned at our feet. Wayne was working with Bryce on one of his pet projects, but lately he had been sending his daughter to handle business. "Have fun," I called over my shoulder with a chuckle as I started toward my office once again. I had barely sat down at my desk when my cell phone rang. Pulling it out of my pants pocket, I saw Amber's face smiling back at me and quickly lifted it to my ear. I didn't know many men who were still friends with their ex-wives, but my relationship with Amber had never been a normal one. "Hey, what's up?"
Did Ash pick up Jamie yet?
"About 5 minutes ago," I assured her.
Damn,
she muttered.
I was hoping to talk to him.
"So just call Ash," I told her as I turned my desk chair to look out at the stormy sky. I would never tell Amber, but I hated my office. It would hurt her feelings if I changed it, though, and I cared about her too much to do that. She should be home in about 20 minutes or so. There was a pause on her end, and I couldn't help being curious. Amber and Ash had been best friends since grammar school. They talked every day and told each other everything. Almost everything, at least, I reminded myself. My hand tightened unconsciously around my phone. "What's wrong, Amber?" I asked when she didn't say anything. "Everything okay with you and Ash?" She blew out a long sigh.
Leo asked me to marry him last night.
she finally muttered. But instead of sounding ecstatic like I would have expected, she seemed almost depressed. Good for him, I told her, genuinely happy for her, while something clenched inside. If she wasn't happy, if that bastard did anything to hurt Amber, I wouldn't hesitate to annihilate him. It's about damn time he got his head out of his ass and proposed. But what does that have to do with Ash? Another sigh. I knew her so well I could actually picture her biting her bottom lip in frustration.
I'm nervous to tell Ash.
May I ask why?
Well, she wasn't exactly over the moon when I married you, Sawyer. This time around, I actually want a wedding, a huge wedding, and I want her to be my maid of honor, but...
She broke off with a shaky exhale.
What if she says no?
I leaned my head back against the chair and closed my eyes. I could have told her why her best friend had been so upset when we had gotten married, but neither I nor Ash had told her about our history. I wasn't about to put it out there now. Amber would kill me, and Ash would probably help her. Ash would never tell you no, Amber. Just call her. You know it will make you feel better.
I know you're right, but I'm still scared. She's my best friend. Ash is like a sister to me.
Her voice was quiet, almost meek, very unlike Amber.
I want her to be happy for me, not try to block me out like the last time I got married.
The urge to tell her doubled. I clenched my jaw to hold back the words. My ex didn't need to know what a complete douchebag I was, or that she had basically shattered her best friend just as much as I had when she had married me. Ash hadn't held that against her, though. Their relationship, although tense at the beginning of our marriage, had quickly gone back to the way it had always been. But that brief period of strain between the two was now making Amber's happy news less exciting for her.
I don't know what to tell you, sweetheart.
I finally gritted out.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to unload on you, Sawyer.
You know I'm here whenever you want to talk, I reminded her. We had sucked as husband and wife. What we had shown the world had been a complete fantasy compared to what went on behind closed doors, proving that both me and Amber were pretty good actors. But as friends, I thought we were pretty good together.
Yeah, I know.
She laughed a little self-deprecatingly.
I'll pull up my big girl panties now, I guess. I'll call Ash tonight and ask her if she will be my maid of honor.
I'm glad. There was another pause where I could actually feel her hesitation. What?
Okay, this probably will sound really strange, but we've always been strange, I guess.
She was rambling, which told me she was nervous. It was kind of cute, and I grinned.
I mean, when my parents got a divorce, they threw crap at each other and tried to kill one another a few times. It was an ugly court battle when they fought over custody of me. Yet here we are. You're happy that I'm marrying someone else, and I think our kid has come out pretty well adjusted, don't you?
I tried not to laugh. Yes, Amber, Jamie is very well adjusted.
You're kind of the only family I have left, Sawyer.
The cute rambling was over, replaced with a sadness that sat heavily on my chest. I might not have ever been in love with the woman, but we had created life together when we'd had Jamie. Part of me would always care about her.
You've been there for me through a lot, and I don't know how I would have survived without you.
Amber. I groaned when I heard her tears. I had never been able to handle her tears.
I know. I'm sorry. I just have a lot on my mind right now, and I'm screwing this all up.
Her next exhale was long and loud.
What I'm trying to ask is, will you give me away?
Her request, the emotions that seemed to come with the words, hit me dead center in the chest. My first instinct was to say yes, but I wasn't sure how Leon Allister was going to feel about me giving Amber away. He had never been a big fan of mine or me of him. And then, when I had married Amber, he had considered me his nemesis. When he had started dating Amber not long after our divorce 2 years ago, some of his hostility had lessened, but there was still tension between the two of us. I saw the jealousy turn him green whenever I stopped by to pick up Jamie. I understood how the man felt, which was why I hesitated. A full minute passed without either of us speaking. I could almost feel the hurt and disappointment flooding through the phone when Amber gave an uneasy laugh.
I'll understand if you say no. Really, I will. I mean, you're my ex-husband. Why would you want to walk me down the aisle to marry another man?
I'd be honored to give you away, sweetheart. I didn't care if I stepped on Leo's toes. He didn't matter. Amber did.
Really?
She whispered. Just tell me when and where, and I'll be there. When she screamed with excitement, I had to pull the phone away from my ear or risk rupturing my eardrum. Still, I was grinning.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
She was probably bouncing up and down right then, and I was glad that I could make her so happy. A tap on my open door had me turning to find Janice standing in the doorway with a stack of files in her arms. We'll have to celebrate when you get home, dinner with Jamie or something, I told her, waving Janice in. But I have to go now, sweetheart. Work is piling up.
I was able to cancel everything but the meeting with Gates,
Janice informed me in a quiet voice, though Amber still heard her.
Work piling up? You're canceling stuff?
There was concern in her voice now.
Is everything okay? Are you sick?
I'm taking tomorrow off, I told my ex-wife, shooting Janice a look that told her to keep her mouth shut. She pressed her lips together and gave me an apologetic grimace. It's nothing.
It's obviously something if you're taking time off work. You're a freaking workaholic, Sawyer.
I bit back a curse at hearing the stress in her voice, not wanting to tell her why I was suddenly in need of some time off. It wasn't like I could tell her point blank that I was going to skip out on work so I could spend time with Ash. That would only make her curious about why, and then she would poke her nose where she didn't need to poke it. It was going to be hard enough to win Ash back. I didn't need Amber inadvertently fucking it up. I'm fine, Amber. Everything is fine. I just have a few things that need my attention outside of work right now.
Oh,
she murmured.
Oh, do you have a girlfriend? Is that it? You're dating someone and you don't want me to know.
The woman was maddening. I'm not dating anyone. Yet.
Do I know her?
I have to go, Amber. Have a good trip. I hung up before she could ask any more questions. Tossing the phone on my desk, I glared at Janice, who only smirked at me as she placed the files in front of me.
I'll reschedule Gates, shall I?
Make it for next week. My secretary blinked at me in surprise, then nodded her head. Gates and I were working on one of my own pet projects, one that had been 7 years in the making, but that didn't matter to me. The whole thing could have fallen through right then, and I wouldn't have cared less. With Amber gone for the next 2 weeks, it was the perfect time to finally pull my head out of my ass where Ash was concerned.
Anything else?
Find me the best florist, I told her, turning my attention to the work she had just set in front of me so I didn't have to see her brows rise yet again. Find out who has the freshest tulips.
Tulips?
Tulips, preferably yellow and pink ones. When she said nothing, yet continued to stand there staring down at me, I lifted my head. Yellow and pink, Jan, I repeated, my voice full of authority.
Yes, sir, yellow and pink. On it.
3. Ash. My throat felt raw and on fire by the time we got to my apartment. I was chilled down to my bones, even with Sawyer's coat on for warmth. I felt like pure hell, and I was sure I had a fever. Jamie kept shooting me concerned glances out of the corner of his eye on the elevator ride up to my apartment on the 22nd floor, but I pretended not to see. As I unlocked my door, I could almost hear Sawyer's voice saying, "I told you so." Jamie pushed the door open before I could finish pulling my key free, then practically pulled me inside. Once we were over the threshold, he turned only long enough to shut and lock the door before pushing me through the apartment. I frowned down at him when he bypassed the living room and kept pushing me toward my room.
"Take a bath, Aunt Ash,"
he commanded in a tone that made me think of his father.
"You're shivering."
I stopped in front of my bedroom door, refusing to be pushed another inch, and crouched down so we were on the same eye level. "Jamie, I'm fine," I tried to assure him. His little hand pressed against my forehead, worry wrinkling his brow.
"You're running a fever."
He was right, but I didn't want to make him worry about me. I was the adult, not him. He was too young to have to stress over someone's health. "How about this?" I started, and he crossed his arms over his chest and gave me a look that was so much like Sawyer that my heart gave another painful flip-flop. "You get changed in your room, and I'll turn on your favorite show. I'll take a shower." He started to protest, but I lifted a hand to stop him. "And then you can help me finish up all the work I'm supposed to turn into my editor by tomorrow." A harsh sigh left his lips, but he nodded.
Okay, he muttered. I guess that sounds like a good plan.
A smile teased at my lips. Good. I straightened and was the one to do the pushing this time. I had 2 bedrooms. When Jamie had been born and I had started babysitting him so much, I had turned my guest room into a nursery. The crib was gone now, replaced with a full-sized bed with black and red sheets and matching comforter. The room screamed Jamie's personality. From the toys that were practically spilling out of the toy chest in one corner, to the pictures he had drawn and I had placed in picture frames around the entire room. His artwork wasn't the only things that were in the frames. There were at least 10 pictures I had taken in some of them, one of me holding him when he was born, and another more recent picture of the 2 of us at his 5th birthday party. There was one of him and his mom, and another of him with his dad, both of which sat on the bedside table, so he could always have his parents watching over him. Every picture had a meaning for Jamie, and it made him feel like he was in his own home when he saw them. To him, he didn't just have one home or even 2 now that his parents were divorced and lived in separate houses. He had 3, knowing that I would always be there for him. I left him in his room while he changed his clothes and washed up. Going into the living room, I readied his favorite show on Netflix before going into my spacious kitchen to make him a snack. I started sneezing before I had even gotten the fridge open. It felt like my head was going to explode with each one that seemed to be forced from my nose. Damn it. If I kept this up, Sawyer was going to gloat about being right. Reaching for a paper towel over the sink, I blew my nose, then washed my hands before quickly putting Jamie's snack together. The juice box and grapes were already waiting on him by the time he walked into the living room. Knowing he could take it from there, I went to my room and pulled off Sawyer's coat. It was wet from my clothes. I would have to have it cleaned before I gave it back to him. Shaking my head at the coat, I tossed it in the corner of the room and started stripping. As I walked into my bathroom, I decided to take Jamie's advice after all and take a bath. Throwing my wet clothes in my hamper, I started running the water, adding a little of my favorite bath salts and bubble bath. Steam filled the bathroom, helping me unthaw a little. Grabbing my robe, I went to make sure Jamie was okay. He was already lost in his show and didn't even lift his head when I asked if he needed anything.
I'm good,
he assured me, without taking his eyes off the screen. Grinning, I headed back to my room. Making sure my phone was in reach, I stepped into the bathtub and moaned as the heat from the water soaked away the chill that had taken my body hostage. As I sat back, sinking farther into the fragrant water and bubbles, all the energy seemed to soak away as well. I leaned my head back against my bath pillow. My throat felt like I had swallowed glass, and I suspected I had strep. Awesome. Just what I needed. I only hoped Jamie wouldn't get it. I stayed in the bath until the water began to cool, then forced myself to get out. I had no energy, but I still had work to do. Drying off, I put my robe back on, then rinsed my mouth out with Listerine, hoping that would fight off the damn strep until I could get some antibiotics. Doctors and I had never gotten along, and after the incident that had left me covered in scars, I hated them with a passion. Well, all but one. Dominic Baller was my brother's second best friend, and after everything that had happened 6 years ago, he was my lifeline. He knew everything that had happened before, during, and after my accident, which meant he knew more than any other person in the world. Not even Amber or my brother knew all the details. I prayed they never did. Once I had gargled the evil mouthwash, I grabbed my laptop and the stack of work I still needed to get through, along with my phone. Jamie was still in the same spot where I had left him, his eyes still glued to the television, but his drink and dish of grapes were both empty. As I sat down, the ending credits started to roll for the episode he was watching, and I reached for the remote to turn it off. If it were up to me, I would let him watch it for a few hours, but Amber would have my head. Jamie was the kind of kid who had an addictive personality. If you give him one of something, he would take 100 if you let him. Of course, that was something he had gotten from his father. Yet another thing that I found endearing in my godson. With the television off, he went to toss his trash, something Amber and I had both ingrained in him. Except for the moment with the oh-so-lovely Miss Prescott, Jamie normally had exceptional manners. Maybe it was because he was an only child. Regardless, I had never seen a child so well-behaved as him.
"What can I do?"
Jamie asked as he sat beside me on the couch. I grinned and handed him a stack of papers. They were my notes for the article I was writing for my editor. These are all numbered, but they're out of order. Will you fix them for me? I had messed them up on purpose, just to give him something to do. It made him feel important to help me out with work. He took the papers with a somber look on his all-too-handsome face, as if it was a task that would require his full attention, and the fate of the world depended on him getting it right. With him busy sorting the notes, I checked to make sure the pictures I had taken for the article were uploaded and ready to go. It had been an easy assignment, covering the art festival that had taken over Soho over the weekend. It was more about the pictures I had taken rather than the article itself that mattered to my boss. That was why she had given it to me. My skills with a camera were 10 times better than my talent with the written word. I enjoyed my job, but honestly, it was a boring gig. This was not what I had imagined when I had made the choice to go into journalism. I had thought I would be covering stories in war-torn countries, corresponding international news across the globe. A shiver that had nothing to do with my fever went up my spine. Once upon a time, those were the things I had excelled at. I had been a well-respected top correspondent for one of the leading political magazines in the country. I'd worked my ass off to get their internship my junior year of college, and by the time I had graduated, I'd had a promised position that took me everywhere I had ever dreamed. There were moments in everyone's lives when they had to wake up and realize what was important to them. Really, truly important. Did they want to follow their career aspirations, start a family, or whatever else that was the ultimate goal for them in life? I'd had two, and I'd lost them both in a single flash. My fingers started to tremble at thinking about how I had lost it all. Without realizing it, I traced one shaky digit over the scar on my neck. Jamie's eyes seemed to follow the direction of my hand, and it was only when I saw the way his eyes widened that I realized what I was doing. Dropping my hands back onto the laptop, I gave him a shaky smile. "How's it going, bud?" He turned his attention back to the papers in front of him.
"I think I got it, Aunt Ash."
"Thanks, Jamie. I don't know what I'd do without you." And I didn't. It was this precious boy who had brought me back to life, when all I had wanted to do was curl into a ball and die. He gave me a cocky half-grin as he finished putting the papers in order for me.
"I know."
Laughing, I focused on the email I needed to compose for my boss before I started on the article. My job might be boring at times, but it allowed me to work from home so I could have my afternoons free for Jamie. Once he started school the following year, I would still get to see him most afternoons. Amber worked almost as much as Sawyer, and I was happy to pick up the slack for them where Jamie was concerned. While I worked, Jamie went to his room and brought back a coloring book and crayons, along with 2 of his favorite action figures. He sat them on my coffee table so they could oversee his work, chatting with them every so often as he colored me a picture. Art was definitely not a talent he had gotten from either of his parents. It was something that I had made him fall in love with from the first time he had picked up his first crayon. 2 hours passed before I was done, by which time my head pounded as I leaned back against the couch. I had to fight to keep my eyes open as I hit send on the email to my boss, and then let out a relieved breath when I shut my laptop. Jamie lifted his head as I shifted the papers I had scattered around me, cleaning up my mess through eyelids that refused to stay open.
You look sleepy, Aunt Ash.
There was concern in his voice. I knew he was just as tired as I was. A nap sounded like heaven right then. I fought back a yawn, knowing that it would only make my throat hurt more if I let it free. I am a little, I told him, as I stacked the papers together and set them on top of my computer, before neatly placing them all on my end table. Taking the throw off the back of the couch, I shifted until I was lying down, my head resting on one of my many colorful pillows, and covered myself. Come here, bud. I could really use a cuddle. He jumped up without so much as a huff in annoyance, a happy smile on his face as he laid down beside me. His head was cushioned on my chest, and I made sure that I didn't breathe on him as I cuddled him close and covered him with the soft fleece throw. I could predict down to the second when his eyes would close, and then his breathing evened out. He was fast asleep, safe in the knowledge that I would protect him. Smiling, I settled in for the long haul. The lights were still on, but I couldn't be bothered to turn them off. With Jamie's warmth and weight offering me the only comfort I wanted, sleep pulled me down quickly. The dreams always came when I was overtired or sick. Hell, they came whenever I saw Sawyer. There was no escaping them. No way to hide except to avoid sleep. The few times I had done that, the dreams had been 10 times more intense when I finally dropped into an exhausted sleep. My dreams were always the same, no matter what I did, no matter how I tried to change the outcome. They were mostly brief flashes of the past, just enough to tear my heart apart and my subconscious to come out and play with the things I knew I should have done differently. And the dreams, the memories, devoured me.
4. Sawyer. I couldn't make myself concentrate on work for long. By the time 4 o'clock came around, I was itching to get out of the office. Unable to fight the urge to get to Ash's place, I finally grabbed my keys, not bothering with the briefcase I normally would have stuffed full of work to go over when I got home. Making sure I had my phone, I headed out, stopping only long enough to tell Janice I was leaving. Both women's heads snapped up when I told my secretary what I was doing. Janice stood, her growing belly catching my attention as she put her hands on her hips and glared at me. "Seriously, what is wrong with you? Are you dying? You never leave the office before 8. "I have something important waiting on me," I told her with a shrug, then turned to leave. "You're coming back the day after tomorrow, right?" she demanded as she followed after me. "I only cleared tomorrow for you." I paused at the reception desk. "I don't know. I'll let you know. I might take the rest of the week off." I didn't want to waste a single minute. 2 weeks wasn't nearly long enough to accomplish getting Ash to give me a second chance. Nevertheless, I knew once Amber got back, Ash would shut me out again. Janice grasped my wrist, forcing me to look at her. "Is this some ploy to make me stay?" she demanded. "Are you trying to guilt me into coming back after the baby is born?" "Of course not. This has nothing to do with you." I was getting tired of her jumping to the conclusion that something was seriously wrong with me. In the last 6 years, I had only had 2 out of the 3 things I loved and needed: work and Jamie. I was done being without Ash. Work could go to hell for all I cared right then. Ash was just as important to me as Jamie, and it was time I showed her how much I needed her. Janice's eyes narrowed on me for a long moment before her face cleared and she actually grinned at me. "Whoever this woman is, she must be pretty special if she has you taking time off work." She released my wrist and stepped back. "Okay then, just let me know how long you're going to be out so I can work some magic on your schedule." My secretary headed back to her office, and I turned to face Leah, who was busy at her computer, pretending like she hadn't overheard Janice. "Transfer any important calls to my cell," I told her. "But unless it's life or death, it's not important enough to me." Her lips twitched, but she was too much of a professional to actually laugh at me. "Sure thing. Enjoy your evening." The drive to Ash's apartment took nearly half an hour. My legs twitched with restlessness the entire ride. I knew that it wasn't going to be easy to get Ash back. She wasn't likely to make it as easy for me to win her heart this time around. I had fucked up bad. Deep down, I realized that in the end, I might not come out the other side with her beside me. No, I couldn't live with that. I would get her back. I had to. The cab driver had barely pulled to a stop outside of Ash's building when I tossed him some cash and jumped out. This wasn't the same place she had lived when we were together 6 years ago. I hadn't been here often, and only to pick Jamie up on a few occasions. However, I knew this place had better security, and that she now had a 2-bedroom rather than the smaller 1-bedroom apartment she'd had back then. As I approached the entrance, the doorman tipped his head in greeting to me. I might not come here often, but they knew who I was. The guy didn't even question me as he opened the door for me. I headed straight for the elevators and hit the call button. When one arrived, 2 women stepped off, and I stepped back to let them pass, feeling their eyes on me. I didn't give them a second glance as I entered the elevator and hit the button for the 22nd floor. The closer I got to her apartment, the harder my heart beat. My hands started to shake as I lifted one to ring the doorbell. It was several long moments later before I heard movement on the other side of the door. "Who is it?" Jamie called out. "Jamie, it's Dad." I heard the locks being undone, and then the door was open, with my son standing on the other side. "Dad!" He grabbed my hand and tugged me inside. "Something's wrong with Aunt Ash." Closing the door behind me, I glanced around the living room. There was a rumpled throw on the couch. Ash's laptop and a bunch of scribbled-on papers were stacked on the end table. Jamie pulled on my hand harder, leading me through the living room and toward the bedrooms. I could hear her before we even got to her room. "Jamie, go to your room," I told him as I pulled off my suit jacket. "Your aunt won't want you to see her like she is right now." "But—" "Go, Jamie," I ordered, my tone leaving no room for argument. I pushed open the bedroom door and closed it behind me just as I heard Ash throw up again. I didn't waste time glancing around her bedroom as I hurried into the bathroom. I found her on the floor, holding the sides of the toilet as she retched and heaved. I grabbed a washcloth out of the little closet beside the shower and hurriedly dampened it before crouching down beside her. When I touched her arm, she jerked and lifted her eyes. They were glazed with pain and fatigue, her brow covered in sweat, and she looked pale as death. Shaking my head at her, I wiped the washcloth over her brow, unable to ignore the fact that she was running a scalding fever. She moaned at the coolness against her skin. "Baby, what's wrong?" I asked in a quiet, soothing tone. "What hurts?" She leaned closer to my touch, wanting more of the coolness from the washcloth. "I think I have strep." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I wanted to scold her for being out without her coat in the rain earlier, but Jamie had had strep so many times that I knew getting wet earlier hadn't given it to her. It was going around, and when I had picked Jamie up after lunch from daycare, the staff had told me that 5 kids were out with it that day. Grimacing, I wiped her brow again and started cleaning her up. That she didn't protest only told me how sick she really was. She was normally too independent to want help with anything. Helping her stand, I opened the bottle of mouthwash so she could get rid of the taste of vomit. Her entire body seemed to tremble from the effort to keep standing, the fever consuming every ounce of energy she still had. Her knees started to buckle, but I lifted her into my arms. Her slight weight felt like nothing in my arms as I carried her into the bedroom and laid her on top of the covers. I pulled them back, then tucked her in before going back to the bathroom and cleaning it up. I flushed the toilet, then sprayed all the surfaces with the can of Lysol I found under the sink. Once everything was disinfected, I opened the medicine cabinet and pulled out a bottle of Tylenol and an unopened bottle of throat spray. Pouring a glass of water from the sink, I then went back to Ash, who was huddled under the covers, shivering like she was freezing. "I'm so sorry," she whispered as she lifted her lashes to look at me. I put the medicine on the nightstand along with the glass of water, then sat down on the edge of her bed. Leaning forward, I put a hand on each side of her head. "Why are you sorry? You can't help that you're sick, baby." "Jamie," she said with a moan, twin tears rolling down her face. "I don't want to get him sick, but I probably have." I wiped away the tears with my thumb before they could reach her lips. "He's probably the one who got you sick, Ash, not the other way around. This shit is going around the daycare right now." I tried to reassure her, but 2 more tears fell from her eyes, making my heart twist at the sight. I couldn't stand Amber's tears, but Ash's destroyed me. She was so strong and kept her emotions so locked up that I had only ever seen her cry a handful of times in all the years I had known her. Seeing them now gutted me. She loved Jamie like he was her own, despite all the shit I had put her through. "Here," I urged, helping her sit up before reaching for the bottle of Tylenol. "This will make you feel a little better." I shook out 2 tablets and handed them in the water to her. She took them and swallowed painfully. Pulling my phone out of my front pocket, I turned on the flashlight. "Let me see." When she gave me a pitiful glare, I tapped her chin. "Come on, Ash, I need to see how bad it is." Picking up the bottle of throat spray, I shook it enticingly. "I'll numb you up as soon as I'm done." Blowing out a tired huff, she opened her mouth and reluctantly stuck out her tongue. Using the flashlight on my phone, I shined it in the back of her throat and swallowed a curse. Enlarged tonsils, white blisters, and a bright red throat. She was going to need antibiotics, and I knew she would fight me tooth and nail about going to the doctor. Seeing the look on my face, she snapped her mouth shut and licked her cracked lips. "I'm not going," she grumbled in a painfully hoarse voice that was cut off abruptly when she started coughing. Listening to her cough made my own chest hurt. "Baby, you have to see a doctor. That cough is bad. You might have a respiratory infection, too." "I just need to rest," she muttered mutinously. "You need hardcore antibiotics," I argued, knowing it wasn't much use. She was the most stubborn woman I had ever met. I would either have to carry her there myself, or... I gritted my teeth at the only other option I had, knowing it was the lesser of 2 evils and the only one Ash would accept. "I'll call Dominic," I offered, and she seemed to relax. Okay." She gave in after only a small hesitation. Jealousy burned in my gut, eating at it like an ulcer. I hated how close she and my old friend had gotten over the years. The few occasions Ash had gone to parties I'd been at over the last 6 years, Dominic had been with her every time. It seemed they were always together. So much so that even the trashy gossip columns had suggested the 2 were seriously dating. "Where's your phone, baby?" I asked, pushing a few strands of sweat-soaked hair back from her beautiful face. "He probably won't answer if I call him from mine." She swallowed roughly, grimacing in pain before licking her lips once more. She shifted, making the robe she was wearing fall open ever so slightly, exposing the valley between her breasts. My dick sprang to life, hardening and thickening, pressing painfully against the zipper of my slacks. I mentally cursed my reaction to her. She was sick, yet my body didn't seem to care. It would have responded to her under any condition. "Here," she murmured, pulling her phone from her robe's pocket. I took it from her, letting my fingers linger on the soft skin of her palm before pulling away. Seeing that Dominic's name was close to the top of her recent contacts, my hand tightened around the phone as another shot of jealousy tried to consume me. It wasn't just that he was at the top of her most recent calls. As I glanced at the screen, I saw that his name showed up quite frequently, as in twice a day, sometimes more. "Something wrong?" she asked when I didn't immediately make the call. Clenching my jaw, I put aside my jealousy and hit the man's name before lifting the phone to my ear. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Hey, I was just thinking about you." The urge to punch the man who had once been like a brother to me had my free hand balling into a fist. "Dom." I growled his name and could actually feel him tensing, feel his anger flooding through the connection. "What the fuck are you doing with Ash's phone?" he bit out. "I'm at her apartment with Jamie." My tone didn't change. I was just as pissed at him as he was at me. I could pinpoint the exact day our once close friendship had changed. Could remember down to the minute when everything had blown up and why. I had fucked up. I had made the biggest mistake of my life, and I couldn't regret it because it had given me my son. But with the creation of Jamie, I had lost everything else that was important to me. "That still doesn't explain why you have her phone." I glanced at Ash, who was curled up into a ball. With each inhale, I could hear something rattling in her chest. She looked so small and exhausted. The bullshit that was between me and Dominic didn't matter right then. He could help Ash, and that was what was important. "She's sick, Dom, running a fever so high she's throwing up. Her throat is red, swollen, and has white blisters, and she's wheezing." "Hell." he muttered. Give her something to help with the fever, make her as comfortable as possible. I'll be there as soon as I can. I've already given her some Tylenol, man, but she's still miserable. What can I do to help her? I felt useless just sitting there doing nothing. I wanted to trade places with her, be the one who was ill so she didn't have to feel like this. Just stay with her, Sawyer. I'm going out the door right now. I have to stop and get a few things for her, then I'll be there and you can leave. Leave? There was no fucking way I was leaving her when she was so sick. However, he didn't give me the time to tell him that before the phone went silent in my ear. I wasn't going anywhere. There was a tap on the door before Jamie walked into the bedroom.
Dad?
He ran over to the bed, but he only had eyes for Ash.
Aunt Ash?
He reached for her hand before I could stop him. Holding onto it tightly, he shook it until her eyes opened and she looked right at him.
Jamie,
she whispered, her throat seeming to hurt with each word she spoke.
You should go to your room. I don't want to get you sick, buddy. I don't want to leave you if you're sick.
He touched her pale cheek, his little face twisted with concern for the woman he thought of as a second mother.
I'll take care of you, Aunt Ash, just like you do me when I'm sick.
Her smile was weak.
Thanks, bud. How about getting me a bottle of water out of the fridge?
Eager to help, he ran to get it for her. As soon as he was out the door, her eyes snapped to mine.
Please take him home, Sawyer. I don't want him to catch this.
He's probably already got it, baby. And you heard the kid. We're going to take care of you. I picked up the bottle of throat spray. Here, this will help.
I can do it,
she protested, but I didn't hand over the bottle. We stared each other down, neither one of us willing to back down. Jamie ran back into the room with the bottle of water.
Here you go.
He handed it over, his attention on the red spray in my hand.
Yuck, that stuff tastes bad, but it always makes my throat feel better. You should take some, Aunt Ash. I will as soon as your father gives it to me, buddy.
She smiled tightly.
Let Dad do it,
he urged her.
He does it better. He can get all the red spots that hurt. Jamie.
You heard the boy. She glared at me and I had to fight back a grin. Ash had one huge weakness, and it was my kid. I was going to hell anyway, so I didn't care that I was using my son to get what I wanted. Don't be such a baby and let me help.
Don't be scared, Aunt Ash.
Jamie clasped her hand, giving her a reassuring smile.
It won't hurt.
She huffed, then grimaced in pain when the air brushed over her tender throat. The urge to grin faded at the sight of her hurting. I wanted time with her, but not at the expense of her health, damn it.
Okay, she grumbled. Let's get this over with.
Ash opened her mouth and I clasped her chin between my thumb and forefinger. As I tilted her head back, the scar on her neck caught my attention and everything inside of me froze for a second. No matter how many times I saw that scar, I would never get used to the sight of it. It started at her right ear and went down, all the way to the base of her throat, and across to her collarbone on the left side. It was deep. I had nightmares about that damn thing. I woke up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath because her windpipe had been cut. Ash couldn't breathe, so I couldn't breathe. I had no idea how she had gotten it, and if Amber knew, she had never shared the details with me. Ash had come home from her last assignment overseas with it. The assignment that we had fought over. She had left upset, and I had left pissed. Pissed at her, the world, but mostly at myself.
Stop,
she whispered, her voice shaking. I pulled my eyes away from the scar that could have taken her away from me forever, and turned my attention back to the task at hand.
5. Ash. Someone shifting beside me pulled me out of a deep, restful sleep. I immediately knew it wasn't Jamie. The size was too large. The heat, too intense. Instinct screamed who it was, but I didn't want to believe it. My body was too attuned to the person, my heart already reacting to his nearness, now that I was more aware of my surroundings. Opening my eyes, I swallowed, and prepared myself for it to hurt. But the discomfort was bearable compared to what it had been over the last 2 days. The first thing I saw was the bare chest where my head was pillowed. I remembered this chest all too well. My arm was draped across his waist like it belonged there, and my head was tucked into that special place just under his neck that I had always laid in when I would fall asleep with him. That fresh, spicy scent that I had always connected to Sawyer Brannan filled my nose, making my heart react a little more intensely. I slowly lifted my head. The covers were pulled up to my chest, but they had drifted lower on him when he had shifted. His head was turned away, but the arm I was lying on was wrapped around me tightly, like he was afraid I would disappear if he didn't hold on. The scruff that had been on his face was now turning into a beard. Memory by memory, the last few days drifted back to me. Dominic showing up with meds and checking me over, of him arguing with Sawyer over who should stay with me. Dom had gotten called into the hospital for an emergency, so he had no choice but to let Sawyer stay. I had tried to sleep through the most of it, but every time I had opened my eyes, there he had been, forcing me to drink, to take the antibiotics and steroids that Dominic had left, tempting me to eat a little soup. I'd been so sick I hadn't put up much of a fight. It had been weird to have this man take care of me. Weird, but my heart had soaked up every second of it. The stupid organ. Thankfully, I was feeling more like myself today. I could put a stop to all those crazy melty feelings he had been causing the last 2 days. I should have gotten up, showered after having ran a fever for so long. I felt sticky and gross. Instead, I just lay there, watching Sawyer sleep. When he had been mine, no. When we had been together, I had done this often. Sharing a bed with someone, letting them see you at your most vulnerable was one of the most intimate things any two people could do. For 2 months, when I wasn't off on an assignment, Sawyer had shared my bed every night. We would make love until neither one of us could move another muscle, and I would fall asleep on top of him. I had been in love, and happier than I could ever remember being in my entire life. Except for one thing. He wouldn't let me tell anyone. He hadn't wanted to tell Bryce, afraid my brother wouldn't approve. Therefore, I had kept my mouth shut. I hadn't told anyone, not even Amber. Suddenly feeling cold, I shifted away from the sleeping man and started to get up. I should have realized then that what we'd had was doomed. As the days had turned into weeks, and he had remained adamant about keeping our relationship quiet, I had started to feel more like his dirty little secret. We hadn't gone out, not to dinner, or a movie, or even a simple damn walk. We had stayed locked up in my apartment, making love and eating takeout because we were both too exhausted from the hours of wild sex to cook. When we weren't having sex, we would usually end up arguing, mostly because of my job back then. He had hated when I had to go away on assignments, especially if it meant traveling to the more dangerous countries. My job had always been important to me, but I had been ready to give it up for him. If he would only tell the world that we were together. We had fought the night before that last assignment. I'd gotten a call from my editor at 11 that night, with orders to catch the 5:30 flight out the next morning. Sawyer had given me an ultimatum. Work or him. So I had given him one of my own. I would give up the job I had worked my ass off to get, the job I loved, for him, if he would just tell my brother. When he had hesitated, I had realized that I was never going to be more to him than his secret fuck buddy. If he had loved me, then he wouldn't have hidden the fact that we were together. Realizing that it hurt more than anything I had ever felt up to that point in my life. I was so in love with him, but he obviously hadn't felt anywhere close to the same thing for me. Consequently, I had made him leave, told him to just forget about us. He hadn't argued, which, again, should have told me all I needed to know. He had just grabbed his things and left. I hadn't slept that night, and my head had still been on him when I had been on that damn assignment. My head should have been in the game. I knew how dangerous it could get, and that I should have been more aware of my surroundings. Instead, I had let my guard down and now I would always carry the evidence of that mistake on my body. The scars were my mementos from a time when I had thought I was going to die, but they were nothing to the pain I had faced when I had come home, months later than expected, to find out that Sawyer had married Amber. Tears stung my eyes, making my throat burn. I tossed my legs over the side of the bed and Sawyer shifted behind me. I glanced back in time to see him turn onto his stomach, the cover sliding down a little more to unveil the top of his boxer briefs. His back was just as delicious as his chest, and despite the urge to cry, I found myself reacting to him being in my bed. Forcing myself to turn away, I went into the bathroom and locked the door. After a shower, the urge to cry was gone. But like it always did when I thought about the past, my heart felt bruised all over again. With a towel wrapped around me, I went back into my bedroom to find Sawyer was still asleep. Frowning because it wasn't like him to sleep so long on a weekday, I went into my closet and got dressed. Covered up now, I went back to the bed and shook his arm. "Sawyer," I spoke loudly at his ear. "Hey, don't you have to be at work?" He must have missed the last 2 days to take care of me, which was totally unlike him. He had gone to work with the flu once, and Amber had called me to complain about it. Even when we had been together, he had never missed a day of work, never been late. That he had taken the time off to care for me threatened to melt me, and my feelings were already too close to the surface. I pushed them down and attempted to put up my shields where this guy was concerned. I shook his shoulder again. "Sawyer!" He moved so fast that I yelped as he turned onto his back and pulled me on top of him. He didn't open his eyes as he tucked me close, wrapping his arms around me in a tight band. "Let's go back to sleep," he murmured, kissing the top of my head. "You should get some more rest." "I'm fine now," I said, as I pushed against his chest, trying to get away. I couldn't do this, not now. He was weakening the walls I had spent years reinforcing, and they were already threatening to crumble. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. "It's almost 8. You're going to be late for work." I felt another kiss on the top of my head, as he eased his hold enough so he could trace little figure 8s on my back. "Not going." "Okay, then get up." I didn't care if he went to work or not. I wanted him out of my apartment. Fuck. I had moved from my old one because the memories had been too much. I didn't want new ones of him in my bed to haunt me. "If you want to sleep, go back to your place and sleep there." "Nah, I'm good here." With one of his hands he started stroking up and down my back, making goosebumps pop up along my entire body. Even through my clothes, the feel of his caressing fingers was enough to make my body come alive. "No, Sawyer." I started as the bedroom door opened. Jamie ran into my bedroom, still dressed in pajamas. He jumped onto my bed and grinned when he saw that I was dressed.
Are you feeling better, Aunt Ash?
I expected Sawyer to release me, or to at least loosen his hold. Instead, they tightened, as if he was afraid I would run away, which I would have. I shot him a glare before giving Jamie a small smile. "I'm better, buddy. How about you? Did you get sick?"
No.
He shook his head and I reminded myself to get his hair cut when a few locks fell into his eyes.
I'm hungry. Can we have pancakes?
"Sure," I started to assure him, but Sawyer cut me off.
"I'll make them. Give us a minute though, son. Okay?"
Jamie shrugged.
Okay. Can I cuddle with you too?
One of Sawyer's arms released me and pulled Jamie down onto his other shoulder. With his head so close to mine, Jamie reached out and cupped my face, laughing when he squished my cheeks together, giving me fish face. I tried to smile back when all I wanted to do was cry. This was what I had always wanted. This had been my dream. To have this man, a family. To have moments like this for the rest of my life. It wasn't real. Jamie was my godson, not mine by birth, no matter how much I wanted him to be. And Sawyer wasn't mine. He had never been. Jamie released my face and hugged his dad, his fingers playing with my long hair that was spread across Sawyer's chest.
This is nice. I like it. We look like a family.
Lowering my lashes to hide the sudden blur of tears filling my eyes, I sucked in a harsh breath and tried not to let my emotions destroy me. Yeah, we do. Sawyer kissed the top of my head yet again, causing a painful stab just under my breast. I could get used to this. How about you?
Yeah.
Jamie exclaimed excitedly. I just laid there, too choked up to speak. This might have been my dream, but it hurt so much right then. I wanted Sawyer to leave, and I needed him to take Jamie with him, because I was about to lose all control and start crying. I couldn't do that with either of them there. It would scare Jamie, and I couldn't embarrass myself by crying like that in front of Sawyer. We stayed like that for a few more minutes, just the three of us in my bed, my heart breaking a little more with each passing second. Then Jamie began to get restless, something I was grateful for. He jumped up, bouncing the bed a little.
What time is it? Mommy is supposed to call.
The reality of Amber was enough to force my tears away. I jerked away from Sawyer and got to my feet. I'll make the pancakes, I muttered, practically running from the room. In the kitchen, I walked into the pantry and held the doorknob as I sucked in one deep breath after another, letting a few tears fall before they became too much to contain. Closing my eyes, I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I had to get Sawyer out of my home. I had to erase the memories he was making before they started to haunt me. 6. Ash. From the other side of the door, I heard Jamie's voice, but the wood was so thick that I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying. The excitement in his tone alone told me that he was speaking to his mother. I hurriedly wiped my eyes and dried my cheeks, making sure I was completely under control before grabbing everything in the pantry I needed to make pancakes. Opening the door, I calmly walked to the island and laid everything out before pulling out a mixing bowl. Jamie parked himself on one of the stools, giving me a huge grin as he pressed the phone closer to his ear.
I miss you too, Mommy. Bring me back a present, okay?
Even from across the island, I could hear Amber's laugh, and then Jamie was holding the landline phone out to me.
She wants to talk to you, Aunt Ash.
I swallowed hard, but gave him a smile as I took the phone from him, turning toward the fridge to get the eggs and milk, but really to give myself 2 seconds of not having to fake anything. I slowly pressed the phone to my ear. Hi, Amber, I greeted, trying to sound normal.
How are you feeling?
Were the first words out of her mouth.
Sawyer said he was taking care of you, but I didn't believe him until Jamie told me how sick you were.
I grabbed the carton of organic eggs, then just stood there, staring at the milk, giving myself a little more time. I'm good now. How are things there? Are you and Leo having a good time? There was a pause on her end, and for a moment, I thought it was a bad connection and she had lost service. Then I heard Leo in the background clearing his throat, and I realized something was up with my friend. Amber? I heard her exhale through her nose and put the eggs back in the fridge. Closing the door, I moved out of the kitchen, knowing I was going to need to be out of hearing range of Jamie for this conversation. Hey, I murmured, as I walked through the living room and headed for my room. Hearing the shower on in my bathroom, I groaned, bypassing my bedroom for Jamie's. What's going on?
Okay, here it is. Leo asked me to marry him.
I blinked, not sure why my best friend had been so conflicted about telling me. That she had hesitated for so long told me something was seriously up with her. That's great news, I cried. It's about damn time. Leo's had his head up his ass for long enough.
It's great news, she repeated. You think so?
I dropped down onto Jamie's still messy bed. Of course it is. I'm so happy for you, Amber. Tell the idiot I said congratulations. He got himself the best woman ever. She released a breath like she had been holding it.
Oh, Ash, I'm so relieved you're happy.
What? I exclaimed.
Why? Because of how you acted when I married Sawyer.
Things were tense with us for months. Those were some of the worst weeks of my life. I flopped back onto the bed, covering my eyes with my free hand as I tried to come up with an excuse for the way I had acted. I couldn't tell her the truth, that I had been devastated and heartbroken when I had come home from that last assignment to find her married to the guy I had been in love with. On top of telling me she had eloped with Sawyer, she had told me she was pregnant. After everything that had happened during the weeks I had been gone, I had suddenly wished I hadn't survived that horrific time. My heart had shattered into a billion pieces at my feet. It wasn't Amber's fault. I had never told her about Sawyer and me. She hadn't known, and I couldn't tell her. Not then. And I wasn't about to open that can of worms by telling her right now. It took me a while to get back to the old me after everything that happened, Amber. My head wasn't in the right place. Not a lie. It had been months before I could even close my eyes without reliving what had happened to me. The nightmares had been just as bad, worse at times, and sleep had been my enemy for a long, long time afterward. I'm so sorry if I hurt your feelings, sweetie. I didn't mean to, and I hate that you thought I wouldn't be happy for you and Leo. No, I'm sorry. I could hear the tears in her voice now. I'm such a selfish bitch, Ash. I was so worried about you not being happy for me that I didn't even think about what was going on with you back then. You know I love you, right? That you're one of my top 3 favorite people? You and Leo tie for second place. I found myself smiling. Yes, I know. I love you too. My life would be so empty without you in it. Back at you, babe. She cleared her throat, and I finally heard the excitement and joy that she should have been feeling from the instant Leo had asked her to marry him. So, will you be my maid of honor? Are you kidding me? Of course I will. Yay! She squealed. Oh my gosh, we have to go shopping as soon as I get back. I've convinced Leo to let us have a huge wedding, and there's so much to do. She went on and on, telling me everything that we had to do, while I could barely keep up. That was Amber, so full of life. She was like the sun at times, and everyone and everything seemed to orbit around her. Aunt Ash, Jamie called from the kitchen. I groaned, having completely forgotten about the pancakes. Your kid is hungry. I'm going to go make him some breakfast. Call me later and I'll make a list of all the things I can do on my end to get the ball rolling for you. Sounds like a plan. She paused again, then lowered her voice. Hey, what do you know about this woman Sawyer has seen? Everything inside of me went still. My heart completely stopped in my chest, my brain threatening to shut down at that last question. Sawyer was seeing someone? Of course he was. Shaking my head, I closed my eyes and mentally called myself an idiot. Earlier, lying in bed with my head on his chest and his arms wrapped around me had gotten my stupid heart thinking that he might want... What? Not me. Not us. Ash, are you there? I swallowed the lump that had filled my throat. I'm here, I muttered. Honestly, Amber, I didn't know he was seeing anyone. You know I'm not that close to Sawyer. We've barely tolerated each other over the last 6 years. She sighed. Yes, I guess. I'm just curious. I don't want him to get hurt. I'll keep my ears open, I promised her. I'm sure you'll find out about who she is soon if he's seen someone. I mean, he'd want to introduce her to Jamie eventually, and Jamie tells me and you everything. You're right. Well, I'll let you go. Give my little man a kiss for me. Love you. Love you, I whispered before hitting the disconnect button. Jumping to my feet, I headed back to the kitchen. Entering the room, I froze when I saw Sawyer standing at the island. His hair was wet, and all he was wearing was a pair of dress pants. His chest was bare and there was a smear of batter across his left pec. My body went white hot at the sight of him like that. His hard chest, those defined abs, and the thin trail of dark hair arrowing down into his pants. I had never seen a sexier sight than right then. His biceps flexed as he continued to mix. He lifted his head, a knowing grin on his beautifully masculine face.
"Did Amber tell you?"
Hearing my friend's name coming from his mouth was like having a bucket of iced water dropped over my head. Clenching my jaw, I nodded and took a seat beside Jamie on the other side of the island from Sawyer. Yes, I'm excited for her.
"I told her you would be."
He moved to the stove behind him and started pouring out the mixture.
Tell you what?
Jamie asked curiously, watching his father and I closely. Nothing, buddy. I ruffled his hair, knowing that Amber would want to tell her son the news personally. Ugh, this hair is killing me. How about you and I go get you a haircut later?
Yes, please.
Sawyer shook his head, concern darkening his voice.
"Do you think you should be out right now? You're just getting better, Ash."
I'm fine now, I assured him, combing my fingers through Jamie's hair to avoid looking at him. Besides, if his hair gets any longer, I'm going to use him as a mop and clean the floors. Jamie pushed my hand away.
You're silly, Aunt Ash.
Sawyer flipped the pancakes.
"Fine, but I'm coming with you."
I shrugged. Do what you want. I'll set up his haircut and then you two can head home after. I need to stop by the magazine and see what my editor has for me to do this weekend. His eyes narrowed, but the doorbell rang before he could argue. Pushing away from the island, I stood before Jamie could offer to get the door. Figuring, hoping, it was Dominic there to check up on me, I opened the door with a welcoming smile on my face. The guy standing on the other side in a delivery uniform and a huge bouquet of the most beautiful tulip arrangement I had ever seen caught me off guard. For one, the doorman wouldn't have let the guy up without being told it was okay. For another, tulips were my favorite, especially the pink and yellow ones mixed in with wildflowers, and a single white rose in the center.
"Miss Montgomery?"
the delivery man inquired with a pleasant smile. Yes, I couldn't take my eyes off the flowers or the vase they were in. He thrust the arrangement toward me.
"These are for you."
I grasped the vase without really thinking about it. Stepping back, the man gave me a nod, then headed for the elevators. Stunned, I slowly closed the door, already burying my face in the flowers. Spotting the card that was tucked discreetly into the arrangement, I carefully pulled it out as I set the vase on the coffee table. Love, S.
"Do you like them?"
My head snapped up at the sound of his voice. I found him standing only a few feet away, watching me closely. He was still shirtless, but at least he had cleaned his chest off. The absence of the pancake smear did nothing to distract from the rest of him, though. I forced my gaze back up to his eyes. "Why?" I whispered. He had never sent me flowers before. Not once. I didn't even know how he knew I loved tulips, or that pink and yellow were my favorites. Dark brows lifted.
"Why what?"
"Why would you send them?" I snapped, tucking the card into my back jeans pocket. "What are you doing, Sawyer? Do you even know?"
"I wanted to do something special for you,"
he answered after a brief pause.
"To show you that you're special to me, Ash."
"Me?" I shook my head, a hysterical laugh starting to build. It was either laugh or cry, and I had done enough crying where this man was concerned. "Tell me something, and I want the truth. How did you know these were my favorite flowers? How did you know the colors? You never sent me flowers before, not once, and I'm pretty sure the topic never came up in any of our conversations." I saw the answer flash across his face before he could hide it. I had been expecting it, but it didn't mean it made it hurt any less. He knew because of Amber, my friend who sent me flowers for no reason at all. She was sweet like that, always doing something out of the blue that would make me smile.
"I didn't do this to hurt you,"
he muttered with a grimace.
"I remembered she sent you those flowers on your birthday one year. I told my secretary to send them on Monday before you were sick. They were just supposed to be something to let you know I was thinking about you."
I lowered my gaze back to the flowers. They really were beautiful. Just looking at them made me want to melt all over again. But I couldn't do that. Not with this man. Not when he could so easily destroy me all over again. "I think you should have sent them to the woman you're seeing instead," I bit out, reminding myself of what Amber had said earlier. The flowers lost some of their shine in my eyes, and I suddenly wanted to throw them in the trash. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded as he moved toward me. "You mean there are so many you don't know which one?" "Sounds about right." I rolled my eyes. "Amber asked about your current girlfriend. Wanted to know if I knew anything about this mysterious new woman who was occupying your time." Sawyer caught my hands as I started to turn away, pulling me against his bare chest. His body heat burned through my clothes, waking my body up all over again as liquid desire pooled between my legs, making me ache in a way only this man had ever caused. Only he could assuage. "The only woman in my life is the one I'm holding right now." He lowered his head, trapping my gaze as easily as he had trapped my body. "I want you back, Ash. I want a second chance." "No," my brain screamed. "Yes," my heart whispered. I pushed against his chest, but he was unmovable. He released my hands only to wrap his arms around my waist. His palms rubbed over my ass, cupping each cheek, his fingers squeezing as he pressed my lower body into his. I felt how reactive he was to my closeness. My pussy clenched in response, my panties becoming uncomfortably wet, as my clit began to throb in need. "I know I fucked up last time," he said with a low growl, "but I won't make those mistakes again, baby." My brain was fogging over with a lust that I had thought I was dead too. But his words were trying to cut through the thickness. I didn't want to think about the last time. The mistakes and pain from back then had nearly killed me. I wouldn't survive a second time. It felt like it was all from another lifetime ago. I'd missed him so much, loved him so much. "Give me a chance, Ash." He breathed into my ear with a rough plea. "We were so good together, and if I hadn't been so fucking stupid, I know we would have lasted. Let me show you, prove to you that I've changed." I was so tempted, but I couldn't completely trust him. How could I, when the last time all he'd had to do was tell my brother? Yet he had refused. I couldn't go back to living that kind of lie. I wasn't going to be his dirty little secret again. Closing my eyes, I pressed my forehead against his bare chest, giving myself a moment to soak in the feel of his arms around me, holding me like I was special to him. That was all I would take. All I needed. I slowly lifted my head and made myself meet his gaze. "I can't," I told him in a voice that shook with unshed tears. "I can't do that again. I won't be your secret anymore." "That's not what I want. This time will be different." His dark eyes pleaded with me, begging me to give him a chance. "I'm sorry, Sawyer. I just can't."
7. Sawyer. If she thought that her saying no was going to stop me from trying, she was out of her mind. I had known that it wasn't going to be easy to get her back, and part of me was glad she was making me work to show her that things would be different this time around. I would show her how important she was to me, how much I loved her. After Jamie's haircut, something I had never gotten to be there for in the past, Ash couldn't get rid of me fast enough. She kept telling Jamie that she had to stop by to see her boss, but I knew it was because she wanted some time on her own to think. While everything inside of me was screaming to keep her close, I didn't argue with her when she left me on the street outside the salon she had been taking my son to for his entire life. Jamie and I stood there watching her taxi blend into the maze of other yellow cars before either of us moved. Then my kid looked up at me once he couldn't see her any longer.
"Do you have to go to work now?"
I took his hand and we started walking in the direction of my office. "I have to stop by, buddy. I'm not working, though. I just have to talk to Uncle Bryce."
"The woman with too much perfume isn't going to be there, is she?"
he asked me with a suspicious expression on his face. My lips twisted in a grimace. God, I hope not. It was only a few blocks to my office building. Jamie kept me entertained with everything his mother had told him that morning when she had made her daily call to him. She hadn't told him yet about her engagement, but I wasn't worried about his reaction to Amber marrying Leo. The other guy had been a big part of his life for the last few years, and I knew they got along well. I couldn't have asked for a better guy to become my son's stepfather, even if my own relationship with the man was tense at best. Once we made it through the metal detectors, we went straight up to my office. As soon as we stepped off, I saw Leah sitting behind her desk.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brannon.
Leah. I nodded as I walked around the receptionist and headed for my office. Jamie, be good. Don't bother Leah.
Okay.
As I went down the hall toward my best friend's office, I didn't pause outside the secretary's shared office. I wasn't in the mood to answer 100 questions from Janice or deal with anything work-related right then. I was on a mission, one that might get me thrown out of the damn window, but I had to do this. Bryce's door was open when I reached it. Normally I would have walked straight in, but right then I wasn't sure how welcome I would be once I told him what I needed to. Instead, I knocked on the doorframe. Bryce's blonde head snapped up from the work on his desk. Seeing me standing there, his brows lifted.
I thought you were taking the week off.
I stepped into the room, shutting the door behind me. I just needed to speak to you. Okay. He was watching me like he thought I had lost my mind. I wasn't completely convinced I hadn't. After holding Ash in my arms that morning, I might have fried my brain. Bryce waved to the chairs in front of his desk. How's my sister? Dom said you were playing nurse. He smirked at me. Better you than me is all I have to say. Ash is the worst patient. She hates being helpless. I dropped down into the seat, leaning forward and putting my elbows on my knees, clasping my hands together. She's feeling better today. Actually, she's why I'm here. I need to talk to you. My friend sat up straighter in his chair, his face completely serious now. Is everything okay? Ash is all right, isn't she? She's fine. It was just strep and a respiratory infection. Dominic gave her antibiotic and steroids, I assured him. I'm not here to talk about her health, Bryce. He visibly relaxed. Thank God. After everything that happened 6 years ago, I can't help worrying about her. We nearly lost her. Yeah, I muttered, trying and failing to suppress a shudder at just how close she had come to dying on that last fucking assignment. So, what did you want to talk to me about? Putting his hands behind his head, he leaned back in his chair, giving me his full attention. I shut my mouth and clenched my jaw. I had known this was going to be hard, but I couldn't expect Ash to even consider giving me another chance without doing this first. This was why things had ended between us last time, because I had been too much of a pussy to tell my best friend. If I had just told him then, if I had only confessed how I felt about his little sister, she wouldn't have gone on that fucking assignment. She wouldn't have nearly died. And I wouldn't have Jamie. Nevertheless, I had been scared of how Bryce would react. I hadn't wanted to ruin our friendship, but it was more than that. I hadn't wanted Bryce to know because I hadn't thought I was good enough for his sister, and I hadn't wanted to hear him say the words. Now I didn't care if he told me I wasn't worthy of Ash. I didn't care if he ended our lifelong friendship. Fuck. He could tell me he wanted out of our business partnership, and I couldn't have cared less right then. I only wanted him to know so I could prove to Ash I was serious. I'm in love with Ash. I blurted the words out and then sat back, feeling like the weight of the world had suddenly been lifted from my shoulders. It felt good to admit it to him, to just say the words aloud and let the universe know how I felt. It had been easy to say them once they had left my lips, and regret that I hadn't done it sooner hit me right in the gut like a 10-ton fist. It had been that easy, yet I hadn't done it 6 years ago. Bryce dropped his hands and sat up straighter in his chair, narrowing his eyes on me as he slowly took in what I had just confessed. What did you just say? I love Ash. The words were even easier this time around, flowing smoothly off my tongue. I've always loved her. I always will. He jerked to his feet, but instead of charging around the desk to beat the shit out of me, which was what I had expected him to do, he turned his back on me, looking out over the city below. Bryce did his best thinking standing there, looking out that window. I had seen him come up with some incredible ideas after standing there for hours at a time. He only stood there for less than a minute this time, however, before he was turning on me with a blank expression on his face. Does she know? Does she love you back? Fuck, I hope so. I scrubbed my hands over my face and shook my head. No, she doesn't know. I've never told her. So why the hell are you sitting there telling me this when you should be talking to her about it? He crossed his arms over his chest, the intimidating big brother staring down at me and not my best friend. Because I want to do this right. I'm telling you, and I'm asking for your permission to marry her.
8. Ash. As soon as I was in the taxi, I breathed out a sigh of relief. The morning had been hard for me to get through with a smile on my face, and my cheeks hurt from how many muscles I had strained to keep the act up for Jamie's sake. Sawyer wanted another chance. I couldn't even wrap my head around the possibility. For years I had put on the performance of my life, pretending that he wasn't anything more to me than my best friend's husband. Then he had become her ex-husband, and things had been just as difficult to hide because he hadn't belonged to Amber anymore. Amber. She was a big part of why I couldn't give Sawyer a second chance. Sure, there was all the leftover anger and hurt from our first go, at whatever the hell we had been, but that wasn't the only reason. How was my friend going to react if she found out I had once spent time in her ex's bed? What if she asked me how good it had been for us? What if she compared my time with him to hers? Before Sawyer, Amber had told me all about her sex life with her other boyfriends, but she had never once tried to dish out what it was like with her husband. I had never questioned it, mostly because I was so relieved not to have to hear about how good Sawyer was in bed, something I knew all too well. An hour later found me exiting my boss's office. I had a few different assignments I had to work on over the weekend, none of them exciting, but that was how I liked it these days. With nothing to do until I had to pick Jamie up from Sawyer's office the next day, I decided to surprise Dominic. Knowing my friend, he was working his ass off at his private clinic. I picked him up some lunch, figuring he would have worked straight through the lunch hour and wouldn't stop to think about it until later that evening. His staff gave me warm greetings when they saw me, as I made my way back to his office. Luckily, he was at his desk, scanning over several files. He was so engrossed in them that he didn't even realize I was there, until the bag of sandwiches landed on his desk in front of him. Slightly shaggy mahogany hair flipped back as his head snapped up, and a charming smile lifted his lips when he saw me. He was handsome and sexy, but I had never felt more than friendship for him, even if every society and gossip tabloid in the city had hinted that we were on the road to engagement. Dominic did nothing for me, and as far as I knew, I had never done anything for him either. Whereas I had my secrets about Sawyer, he had his own about someone else. Someone who he had only confided in me about once, when we had both been at our lowest. "She lives," he teased as he got to his feet and walked around the desk. Dominic gave me a quick hug before stepping back and leaning his hip on the edge of his desk. His gray eyes scanned over me, taking everything in within a few seconds before they narrowed on me. "How are you feeling?" I shrugged and took a seat in one of the stylish chairs in front of the desk. "I'm feeling better." "Okay. New question. How are you after having to spend so much time with Sawyer?" His voice held a slight bite to it at the other man's name, and I pressed my lips together. Once upon a time, Sawyer and Dominic had been just as close as I was with Amber. Now, thanks to me, they were barely civil to one another in public. I hated that I was the cause of the rift between them, but I was thankful that I had Dominic to talk to about the past. With him, I didn't have to pretend. I brushed a piece of white fuzz off my pants and shrugged. "I've survived worse, right?" His face paled, but he nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, you definitely have." I leaned back, glaring up at the ceiling. I wasn't there just to bring him lunch. I needed his advice, needed to talk this out before everything ate away what was left of my sanity. Dominic knew I needed a moment to gather my thoughts, so he moved back around his desk and sat. Opening the bag, he pulled out the first sandwich and started going over the patient files in front of him once again, as he took a bite of turkey and cheese on honey wheat. He told me he wants a second chance. I finally told him. Dominic nearly choked on the food in his mouth. He was so surprised by what I had said. Coughing, he reached for his mug of coffee and took several swallows before he could speak again. "He did?" His voice sounded strangled, and he paused to clear it. What the hell, Ash? What did you tell him? No. Of course I told him no. But he was giving me that look now, the one that told me he saw beyond my bullshit to the truth. I lowered my eyes to my hands. Part of me wants to say yes. Because you still love him. It wasn't a question. We both knew that it was the truth. I didn't even try to lie. Ash, if you came here looking for my permission, you've wasted your time. His voice didn't hold a bite to it, but I could hear his resignation and lifted my head to meet his gaze. You are the only one who knows what is best for you. If Sawyer is what you want, if he is what will make you happy, then go after it. All I want is for you to be happy. What about Amber? I whispered, tears already burning my throat. His gray eyes darkened. What about her? Don't you think it's wrong to start dating my best friend's ex? That's got to be a rule in the BFF's guidebook. No more wrong than her sleeping with, getting pregnant, and subsequently marrying the man her best friend was in love with. He gritted out. I couldn't keep from flinching at that reminder. She didn't know that, though. I tried to defend. Dominic rolled his eyes, but didn't argue further about Amber. Just take this one day at a time, Ash. Don't worry about what's right or what's wrong where everyone else is concerned for once. You worry about you, and fuck the rest. 9. Ash. I showed up at Sawyer's office 20 minutes early the next day, having gotten little sleep the night before because I couldn't stop thinking about the scene in my living room with Sawyer the day before. I'd finally given up around 4 that morning and started cleaning my apartment. Cleaning normally helped me think, cleared my head, so I could see things from a new perspective. That wasn't the case this time, however, and all I had done was give myself a headache. This should have been easy. I didn't want to fall back into a relationship like we'd had 6 years ago. I deserved more than to be some sordid secret that Sawyer was too embarrassed to tell the world about. Not the world. Bryce. That was all I had wanted back then, for him to tell the one person who meant everything to the both of us. If he had only told Bryce, I would have given up everything for him. Shaking that thought away, I stepped off the elevator as the doors opened and out onto the top floor. As soon as the doors closed behind me, I felt a shift in the air. It was an odd feeling, not tense, per se, but it was definitely charged. My eyes shifted around nervously. Any time I felt a sudden change like that, it set my nerves on edge. My fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, and I was already looking at the emergency exit. My eyes went first to the conference room, expecting to see a room full of angry CEOs and other staff members. It was completely empty, which only had my instincts working overtime, because I couldn't immediately see the source of my anxiety. "Good morning, Miss Montgomery," Leah murmured, bringing my attention to her. My eyes reluctantly shifted to the receptionist. Her kind, familiar smile eased some of my nervousness. I clasped my shaking hands together and forced a smile for her. "Hi, Leah. Is Jamie ready?" Her brow furrowed. "Mr. Brannon and Jamie haven't been in today. Janice said she cleared his schedule for the entire week." Oh, I felt at a sudden loss. Even though I had been dreading facing Sawyer again today, I had also been looking forward to it. Part of me wanted to know if he had just been full of hot air, trying to get laid. Another part, my damn stupid heart, wanted him to have been sincere and maybe try to fight for me. "Ash?" My head snapped up at the sound of my brother's deep voice, and the tenseness I had felt in the air moments ago intensified. It was rolling off him in waves, making me take a step back, not so much in fear of him because I knew Bryce would never hurt me, but he was revving up my anxiety. I watched as he read the look in my eyes and slowed his pace, lifting his hands in a reassuring way as if he was trying to calm a wild animal. I swallowed down my nervousness as best I could, clenching my hands together harder as my heart beat so hard against my ribs, My entire body seemed to shake. "Hey." His voice was softer now, regret filling his eyes as tears filled my own. He caught my elbows and gently pulled me toward him. I pressed my forehead to his chest, burying my face in the material of his suit jacket as I sucked in one deep breath after another, fighting back the panic attack. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my hair, and I felt his lips touch my temple. I could only nod, not quite trusting my voice just yet. Behind me, I heard the elevator arriving again, and then the doors opened. I didn't dare raise my head as Bryce stroked his hands up and down my spine soothingly, his voice soft as he continued to apologize. "What the hell?" Sawyer's voice exploded behind me seconds before I felt his hand on my shoulder, pulling me away from my brother and tucking me against him. "What did you say to her?" he demanded. "Nothing," Bryce assured him. "I've just been in a grumpy mood since yesterday, and I must have been broadcasting it too harshly. She's still easily spooked." Sawyer's heartbeat was right under my ear, the tempo soothing, the feel of his arms so strong and warm around me, along with the familiar lullaby of his heartbeat, began pulling me back from the darkness of the panic attack that had come on frighteningly quick. "Baby." His lips were right at my ear, his voice slightly strained as he felt me shudder. "What's wrong? What happened?" I clenched my eyes shut and prayed for strength as I pushed back from him a few inches. "It's nothing," I tried to assure him, but his arms tightened around me at the lie. "I'm just a little sensitive to dark emotions." I still suffered from PTSD, but I hadn't had a panic attack in over 8 months. I hated them, hated how weak they made me feel. That wasn't the Ash I had been over 6 years ago. I had been full of life and fire. Nothing and no one could have stood in my way, could have scared me so easily. Now I felt like a coward. Something as little as sensing someone's bad moods set me on edge, and I was thrown back into a past that was the ugliest part of hell imaginable. Sucking in a steadying breath, I pulled away from him and turned toward my brother. "What's going on?" I demanded in a voice that only slightly cracked. "Did one of your projects fall through?" Bryce shot Sawyer a glare from over my head. "No, it's more personal." He held open his arms and I walked into them, letting him hug me. "I'm sorry I got you upset." "It's okay." I stepped back, not deterred by him trying to change the subject. "Something's going on. Did you two fight or something?" I was treated to silence from them both. Frustrated, I put my hands on my hips and gave them a look that Jamie knew better than to ignore. Bryce shifted from foot to foot, unable to withstand my mean mom look, but Sawyer didn't so much as blink at me. His brown gaze wasn't shining with the usual flecks of gold, letting me know without words that he was upset about something. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on," I threatened. My brother glanced over at Leah before blowing out a frustrated breath. Taking my arm, he gently guided me closer to the elevator and lowered his voice. "Sawyer told me." I went completely still, even as I felt the color drain from my face and my eyes widen. He couldn't possibly mean what I thought he meant. Sawyer wouldn't have told him that. "Told you what?" I found myself whispering.
"Everything."
Bryce's face was completely set in stone now, as he shot his best friend and business partner a dark glare that made me shiver at its intensity. I shook my head, not believing him. There was no way Sawyer had told Bryce everything. It didn't make sense. Why would he say something now? It was too late. No, he wouldn't have. Bryce's jaw clenched for a moment, his blue eyes hardening even more if possible.
"I know it all now, Ash. That you were together for months before you had a big misunderstanding. He even told me about Amber. Everything that should have been said years ago."
Shocked at what my brother was saying, I looked up at Sawyer. He just stood there, watching me quietly, with a look in his eyes that called to me. He had told Bryce. He had done the one thing I had always wanted him to do. The one thing that would show me he cared, that he wanted more. 6 years too late. But better late than never, right? My head was jumbled with a mixture of warring emotions. I couldn't have put 2 simple words together if I'd even tried right then. Shaking my head again, I blindly reached behind me until I found the call button and pressed it. I needed time to think, time to put this all together before I did something reckless. Ash. Bryce reached for me, but I was already stepping into the now waiting elevator. Do you love him? There was something odd in my brother's voice. Concern mixed with vulnerability, and something else. Betrayal? I was his little sister, Sawyer his best friend, and he had just found out that we had kept a huge secret from him for years. I couldn't lie to him now. Yes, Bryce. I've always loved him. Before he could react, the elevator doors slid shut, and I fell back against the wall, covering my face with my hands as I silently cried.
10. Sawyer. I watched helplessly as the elevator shut, depriving me of the view of Ash as her parting words echoed in my head. She loved me. She always had. My heart was about to explode in my chest, my breaths coming in harsh gasps as I fought with myself not to follow after her. I could take the stairs, run all the way to the lobby. However, the look on her face told me she needed a few minutes to herself. The shock on her face when Bryce had told her I had confessed it all to him hadn't been what I had expected. If I had thought that opening up to my best friend would set everything right, I had been sorely wrong. I had asked Bryce for his permission to marry Ash, trying to do everything right this time around, and instead of giving me his condolences, he had demanded more. After all, I had already fucked up one marriage. How did I know I wouldn't do it again with Ash? So I told him why I knew a marriage to his sister would last the test of time. Because she had been the only one I had ever loved. That Amber and I had been more of a marriage on paper only rather than truly man and wife. She had been a drunken mistake when I had been at my lowest, and whether she wanted to admit it or not, that was exactly what I had been to Amber too. Our drunken mistake had made something precious when we had been given Jamie, but it was still a mistake nonetheless. As expected, Bryce had been pissed. I had snuck around behind his back with his sister, and then I had broken her heart. I wasn't sure which had upset my friend more, the fact that I had kept something like that from him or that I had hurt Ash in the process. Either way, he had been ready to tear my head off the day before, and if Jamie hadn't been with me, I probably would have let him. To say my relationship with the man who had been closer than a brother to me since I was a kid was strained was an understatement. I wouldn't have been surprised if he decided to break our partnership, but I knew Bryce wouldn't. He would be okay again in a few days, a week tops. As the elevator started its descent, Bryce thrust his hands into his pants pockets and turned to head for his office. The answer is yes, he called over his shoulder. Marry her. Love her. He stopped before he could get around Leah's desk and turned to face me, the look on his face icy. But if you hurt her again, I swear to God, there isn't a place you can hide from me. I won't, I promise you. Her heart is safe with me this time, I vowed. I'll make her happy. I'll love her until the end of time if she will let me. Some of the tension in his shoulders visibly eased. Make sure you do. He started to turn, but paused, a frown on his face. Where's Jamie? Taryn has him for the night. Bryce's face clenched for a completely different reason now. I'm sure he will enjoy helping her take care of the animals. I nodded. He always does. Taryn Sutton was a good friend of both Ash and Amber. We had all grown up in the same neighborhood, but Taryn's mother hadn't liked for her to socialize with many people. Thankfully, she had broken away from her controlling mother when she had gone off to college for veterinarian medicine. Now she was one of the vets for a non-profit animal rescue park. Jamie didn't spend nearly as much time with her as he did with Ash, because she was so busy with her animals. But when he did get to hang out with her, he had a blast. Bryce raked his hands through his hair before checking his watch. I have an appointment. Go after my sister. Tell her what you told me yesterday. She said she loves me. I couldn't keep the awe out of my voice. I was still trying to make myself understand that I wasn't dreaming, that she had really said those words. It had probably cost her a lot to say that in front of me. Now I had to go and make sure that she knew it wasn't just her. I have loved her from the very first time I had kissed her. Nothing had changed. It never would.
11. Ash. My tears had stopped by the time I got home, but my eyes felt swollen and heavy. I wanted to hide under the covers on my bed, pretend like the last hour hadn't happened, that this was all just some crazy dream induced by the remnants of the fever I'd had. I kicked the front door closed and fell face down on my couch, hiding my aching eyes in the cushion. I felt like I had aged about 20 years. A nap was what I needed. Some downtime so I could reboot, and when I woke up, I wouldn't think about Sawyer Brannan or the fact that I had point-blank told my brother that I was in love with his best friend. The heavy fist practically pounding my door in had my head jerking up. I frowned at the barrier that kept me from whomever was on the other side, wishing it was a metal panic room instead of just an oak door with a tiny peephole. 2 guesses who it was. Bryce, maybe, but my money was on Sawyer. "Ash!" His rough voice called through the door. "Ash, please open the door." I sucked in a shuddery breath and pushed my long blonde hair back from my face, debating whether I should let him in or not. I knew I should send him packing, but I'd left the office without Jamie, and he might need me to watch my godson. It was for that reason, and that reason only, really it was, that I got to my feet and crossed to the door. After a small pause so I could gather my courage to face him, I opened the door a few inches and glanced out into the corridor at him. "I'm sorry I forgot Jamie." He moved in close, completely blocking my view. My head tipped back so I could meet his eyes, my nose filling with the fresh, citrusy scent that was so uniquely him. He didn't try to push his way into my apartment, but there was a look in his eyes that told me he wouldn't have to. "I took Jamie to Taryn's this morning. I wanted to have a little time alone with you to talk." His voice had lowered to that rough, seductive tone that never failed to make my thighs tremble and my pussy flood with need for him. "Why did you tell Bryce?" I found myself demanding, needing to understand what the hell this man was doing, why he was pulling a total 180 when we couldn't possibly have a future. Our chance had come and gone. Right? Sawyer leaned his head against the door, his eyes eating me up. "Can we talk about this inside?" I shook my head. "It's safer if you stay on that side of the doorway, and I stay on this one." A ghost of a smile teased at his lips. "Safer for whom, baby?" My lashes lowered, hiding my eyes from him. "Me?" I whispered and heard him groan. "You have nothing to be afraid of, Ash. I just want to talk to you. If you don't like what I have to say, I promise I'll leave. You get to call the shots today. You're in complete control of what happens next." I should have told him to leave right then and there. I should have closed the door in his face and gone to bed. We both knew that I wasn't in complete control here. I was a slave to my desire for him, and there was nothing that could stop me from giving in now. No Jamie to act as a buffer, no Amber to remind me that she had been his wife. The past didn't seem to matter right then. All I could think about was then and there of him holding me again, of being in his arms, having him kiss me, touch me, fuck me. Lifting my lashes, I let him see what I was thinking and watched his nostrils flare with his uneven inhale. Taking a step back, I let him step through the doorway, pushing it closed and locking it before he lifted a hand and touched his fingers to my cheek. I leaned into his touch, loving the contrast of his rough skin caressing me so tenderly. His fingers skimmed over my jaw and down my neck, brushing butterfly wings softly over my scar. I tensed, locking eyes with him, but he didn't show an ounce of pity. There was only pure need in those brown depths. those questing fingers traced from the very top of my scar all the way down to where it disappeared into my shirt, only stopping when he got to the first button of my top.
I told Bryce because it was something I should have done 6 years ago.
He told me with sincere regret in his voice.
I was a blind idiot back then, Ash. All I could see was you and me, and I didn't want the outside world to creep in. You were mine, and I didn't want to share my time with you.
I touched my tongue to my suddenly dry lips, giving myself a moment to gather my thoughts. Why couldn't you just tell me that? I thought you wouldn't tell Bryce because you were only biding your time until you got bored with me or something.
No, baby, no. That wasn't it at all.
He wrapped his arms around me, pulling my face against his chest.
I was a selfish bastard. I knew if we told our families they wouldn't give us a minute of peace until I put a ring on your finger. I wanted us to have a little time to ourselves, to get used to each other, enjoy each other.
Anger quickly replaced the burning need that had tried to consume me. I was wrong. The past did matter right then, and I wouldn't ever be ready to face the future without first confronting that part of our past. I jerked away from him and put several feet between us before turning to face him again. What you mean is that you weren't ready for a big commitment.
No, he growled. That's not what I mean. Damn it, Ash. Stop getting so defensive and actually listen to what I'm saying.
I crossed my arms over my breasts, glaring up at him. How am I supposed to not get defensive about any of this? You just said you wanted some alone time before our families jumped in and made you put a ring on my finger. Instead, you ended up married to my best friend.
This conversation was 6 years overdue.
I had spent that time with a mountain of questions festering inside my brain, demanding to be asked, but only turning into an abscess that was now bursting open as I finally sought the truth. You went from me to her in only a matter of what? Days? A week? Along with the 6 years' worth of anger came the hurt, that gut-wrenching, heart-shattering pain that had left me feeling suffocated for such a long time. Sawyer turned gray under his normally golden complexion.
It wasn't like that.
How was it then? I demanded, cutting him off. Tell me how it wasn't like that when I came home 2 months later to find you married to her and Jamie on the way.
You ended things with us,
he bit out, his jaw clenched, going on the defensive just as much as I was.
You told me it was over.
How long? God damn it.
2 weeks.
He scrubbed both hands over his face before bringing his gaze back to my face, his eyes pleading for me to understand.
I made a stupid mistake. I was drinking at that bar close to Amber's office, and we ran into each other. We had a few drinks, and then a few more. Things got out of hand, and we both did something we had no business doing.
I tried to swallow the lump that was now blocking my throat. I had wanted to know. I had demanded an answer. Now that I had it, I wanted him to take the words back, wanted them to have never filled this room, never to have touched my ears. They were bouncing around in my chest, breaking my heart all over again. 2 weeks. I wanted to scream, cry, anything to make this pain ease. If my assignment had gone as planned, I would have been back within a week of leaving. If things had happened as they should have, we might have been able to clear the air before he had fallen into bed with Amber. Where would we have been now if that had happened? Would Sawyer have married me? Would we have our own child? Children? Or would we have continued down that destructive path I had felt we were on, and still have ended up hating each other? I would never know, because things hadn't gone as planned. My assignment had taken a hell of a lot longer than 2 weeks.
What do you want me to say?
Sawyer muttered in a defeated tone.
I regret it, Ash. With everything in me. I regret what happened with Amber. But what followed?
He shook his head despairingly, defeat and pain twisting his beautifully masculine face.
How can I regret the results? How can you? Jamie wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my mistake. Not even for you could I regret my son."
For the second time that day, I felt the blood drain from my face. I stumbled backwards several steps and then turned away from him as tears blurred my eyes. He was right. Jamie was my world. Without him, my life would hold no meaning, none. He had been the light when I had been stuck in the darkness. When looked at from that point of view, I wouldn't have changed a single thing about the past, if it meant that my sweet godson would always be a part of my life. I would gladly go back and relive every painful moment from the past.
12. Sawyer. This wasn't going as I had hoped it would. I had thought I would show up at her place, tell her I loved her, and we would spend the rest of the day in her bed, relearning what made her gasp, whimper, scream. But that was the problem. I realized as I stood there, watching as her shoulders trembled while she fought not to cry. I hadn't told her I loved her yet. Fuck. I ran half a dozen multi-million-dollar projects on any given day. I like to think I was a smart man, but I was obviously a stupid jerk, because those 3 little words should have been the first ones out of my mouth as soon as she had opened the door for me. Instead, I had started an argument that had pushed her away all over again. Unable to bear the distance between us a moment longer, I crossed to her and pulled her back against my front. Wrapping my arms around her waist to anchor her to me, I pressed my lips to her ear, inhaling her sweet shampoo. She still used the same peach fragrance she had used 6 years ago. To this day, I couldn't eat that decadent fruit without getting a hard-on. I didn't come here to fight with you, or even to rehash the past. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter. All that matters is the present and the future. I want you to be a part of both, Ash. I took it as a good sign that she wasn't trying to pull away, that she wasn't arguing. We could be so good together, baby.
How do you know that?
Her voice was choked, full of the tears she was holding at bay. I nuzzled her ear with my nose one last time before turning her around to face me. I needed to look her in the eyes when I spoke these words. I needed her to see how sincere I was, how utterly lost for her I was. I love you, Ash. From the moment I brushed my lips against yours, I knew you were the one I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I love you with all my heart. But it goes beyond that. I love you with everything I am, mind, body, and soul. For 6 years you have been on my mind every second of every day. I see your beautiful face and my body is ready and willing in an instant. But it's not just lust. I crave having your soft body against mine to simply hold you. And my soul, it cries for you. You are my soulmate, Ash Montgomery. And if you would just give me a chance, I will gladly spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you how much I love you. A single tear spilled from her right eye, a soft sob escaping her as she tried without success to keep her chin from trembling. I lifted a hand, wiping away the errant tear with my thumb as 2 more poured out, followed by 1,000,000 more. My gut clenched at the sight. Her tears were like acid rain on my heart, slowly killing me a little more with each drop that spilled from those blue eyes. Baby. She shook her head, making her blonde hair fall forward.
No, don't say anything. I'm scared that if you do, you'll call those words back, and if you do that, it might just kill me.
Please don't cry, I begged. A few more tears fell, shredding my soul.
I'm sorry, but I can't help it. For years, I have dreamed of you saying something like this. The reality is so much better.
She pressed her face into my chest, her arms going around me and holding on tightly. I breathed a small sigh of relief, thankful that she wasn't pushing me away. I rocked her in my arms, savoring the feel of her against me, soaking it up in case this turned out to be a dream. A memory of a song flashed back to me. I had just walked through the door of Ash's old apartment, and had heard it playing before I had even crossed the threshold. It had been slow, sensual. Curious, I had gone looking for Ash and the source of the music. She had been in the kitchen making dinner and dancing around in nothing more than one of my old t-shirts. Her hair had been pulled into a messy knot on top of her head, random strands falling down around her face, framing it in all its beautiful glory. She had been so lost in the song, singing along and stirring something on the stove. And I had been so entranced, simply standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her for a few moments, until the words had hit me like a blow right between the eyes. "She looks perfect," Ash had sung in her slightly off-key voice. "I don't deserve this." She had turned around then and caught me unashamedly watching her. In that moment, I had known that she was it for me. I had been so in love with her that I knew no one would ever touch my soul like she had. If I died tomorrow, I could go knowing that I had experienced the kind of love that only came around once in a lifetime. If I lost everything, the money, my house, the expensive cars, friends, and family, I knew that as long as I had this woman beside me, I would survive it all. The music had continued to play, so while she had still stood there, looking up at me with pink adorably filling her cheeks, I had closed the distance between us and pulled her against me. Her mouth had fallen open as I had started dancing with her, and she had kept up as we moved around the kitchen. I hadn't been able to hide the evidence of what her nearness did to my body, and within a minute my dick had been trying to break free of my zipper. I had tried hard to ignore the ache in my balls, wanting to enjoy the moment, the song, and the woman in my arms. I had twirled her twice, but as she had come back to me, she had done a little jump and wrapped her legs around my waist, her lips seeking my own. Now, as that memory began to fade, I knew that everything from that day still applied to how I felt for her. I caught her chin between my thumb and forefinger, lifting her head until I could lower mine and touch my lips to hers. The taste of her was still the same, sweet nectar with a hint of mint. My fingers tightened their hold, urging her to open more for me. As soon as I felt the tip of her tongue touch my own, I was lost. A primal need that was as old as the beginning of time set fire to my veins, causing my blood to burn. Her soft moan vibrated against my lips, driving me even further over the edge of a desire-filled insanity. 6 years was too long to go without her. "Sawyer," she whimpered my name when I released her chin to grasp her ass in both hands, grinding my throbbing dick against her belly. "We need—" My hold tightened, giving each globe a firm squeeze. "A bed. We need a bed right now." I was too far gone for words. Lifting her off her feet, she wrapped her legs around my waist just as they had that night in the kitchen. Her fingers stabbed into my hair, but it was too short for her to pull. Her nails raking over my scalp made me shudder in reaction as I carried her across the apartment to her bedroom. 13. Sawyer. Ash buried her face in my neck, kissing, nibbling, raking over my favorite spots as I tried not to drop her along the way. She weighed nothing at all, but my legs were unsteady with the force of my need, and my hands trembled in reaction to actually having her where I had been wanting her for what felt like an eternity. It took a will I wasn't sure I possessed to not push her up against the closest wall and sink balls deep into her heat then and there. The door to her room was already ajar. I kicked it open before heading straight for the bed, tossing her on top of it. My movements were not in the least graceful as I followed her down, already reaching for buttons and zippers, kneading her naked, aching for the feel of her soft skin against my own. Her hands were just as busy, tugging my shirt apart, forcing the buttons through the holes and sending a few flying in the process. We were both panting, so lost in each other that the world could have ended and we wouldn't have cared. Her pants disappeared over my shoulder along with her light pink panties, leaving her in a top that was half undone, showing me a teasing glimpse of the matching pink bra. I sucked in a breath that sounded unsteady to my own ears. Her legs were slightly spread, giving me a small peek of her perfect pink pussy. Her mound was neatly trimmed, the blonde curls damp with the proof of her desire. Her thighs looked silky smooth, and I knew I would find her dripping wet even before I lifted a shaking hand and traced her pussy lips with my middle finger. Goosebumps arose on her legs and arms, her body trembling so hard her teeth started to chatter. The room was too warm for her to be cold, so I knew it was with need. Her legs fell open more for me, and I circled her clit with my thumb as I thrust my middle finger into her. Her hips rose off the bed, taking me deeper into her tight heat. Ash had been a virgin when we had made love for the first time, and right then she felt just as tight as she had then. If I had been jealous of any other guy touching what I had considered was always mine, it faded right then. For the moment, at least. Ash very obviously hadn't been with anyone else in a long time. Thrusting a second finger deep inside her, I stretched her, getting her ready for my invasion of her sweet body. Her questing hand stopped, and her left arm fell back across her eyes as she panted my name over and over again, riding my fingers, coating them in her honey. She was close. I could feel it in the way her inner walls were starting to contract, trying to suck me deeper. Her breathing was coming faster, and her teeth sunk into her bottom lip, holding back her screams as the release tried to consume her. Once she had screamed so loud that her neighbors at her old apartment had pounded on her wall, yelling for her to get off already. Ever since then, she had tried her best not to scream during sex. She tried, but once she started to come, she couldn't hold back. That was what I wanted, to hear her screaming for me, feel her coming around my fingers, making her forget everyone and everything except for me.
Sawyer, she panted. I need you.
I know, baby, I know. I kissed her lips long and hard.
Come for me. Show me how much you want my cock inside you.
She started to clench her thighs closed, but I moved between them, refusing to let her. I pulled my fingers free, only to thrust in 3 as deep as I could go without hurting her. Her back arched, her hips twisting, and then she was giving me exactly what I had asked for. Her teeth released her bottom lip, her throat tightening with the force of the scream that followed her orgasm.
Sawyer, yes. Oh, God, please, yes.
She caught my wrist, keeping me where I was as she rode out the rest of her release, as if she thought I would leave her hanging halfway through. Her channel was flooded now, soaking my hand in the comforter underneath her. I continued to thrust my fingers into her as deeply as possible without causing her discomfort, wringing her body of every drop she had to give. A long moment later, her body went completely slack, her hands releasing mine as she made a contented mewling sound and snuggled her head into a pillow. Only then did I pull my fingers free and licked them clean as she watched me through heavy-lidded eyes. She sucked in a sharp breath when I lifted my fingers to her mouth and rubbed them along her bottom lip, giving her a tiny taste of herself. My cock was begging for freedom after watching her come so hard. With my free hand, I dipped inside my undone dress pants and boxer briefs, pulling it free and letting her see exactly how far gone I was. Her thighs pressed together as if she had a new, painful ache, even though I had just relieved her of one. Moving quickly, despite how languid her body must have been, she sat up on her knees and slowly finished undressing me. My shirt went first, disappearing over the side of the bed as she pushed me onto my back and started to pull my pants down my legs. My shoes were long gone, and my socks and underwear were pulled from my body so carefully I thought I was going to lose my mind. Completely naked now, I waited for her to make her move, but she just sat back on her heels, watching me. She licked her lips, looking as if she were trying to decide which part of me she wanted to devour first. My dick stood straight up, the tip leaking cum for her to taste.
Baby,
I groaned when she touched her fingertips to my chest, stroking her nails over my pecs.
I love you, but if you take your time, I'm going to die.
I cupped my shaft, stroking it upward to show her a huge drop of cum.
Taste.
As if she had needed the invitation, she covered my hand and lowered her head. The tip of her pink tongue came out, licking away the drop of cum. I watched her swallow it, her eyes closing as she savored the flavor of my seed on her tongue. The groan that left me then was full of primal need. I grabbed her wrists and pulled her on top of me so she was straddling my waist. Hands on her waist, I then lifted her until the tip of my cock teased her entrance. She held her breath as I lowered her, filling her, stretching her far more than my fingers ever could. Her pussy was still soaked, making the slide down easy. Halfway in, I had to stop and take a few calming breaths before I exploded. She fit me like a glove, handmade for my cock. Gritting my teeth, I gripped her hips hard and thrust upward until I was balls deep. She gasped, a look of discomfort on her face filling me with guilt.
I'm sorry, baby.
She pressed her hands into my waist, steadying herself as she sat straight up.
It's been a while for me,
she confessed with a twist of her lips.
For me too,
I assured her.
By a while, I mean 6 years.
She sank her teeth into her bottom lip once again, but she didn't look away as I had feared she might. Relief was like a living entity inside of me. I had only assumed it had been a few years for her. The thought that she hadn't been with anyone besides me hadn't even dared enter my head, but there she was, telling me just that. It's been 4.5 for me. I admitted, not wanting to lie. Her eyes darkened and I watched her swallow hard. Then she shifted her hips, making my mind go completely blank to everything but the feel of being so deeply inside of her.
Let's not talk about the when or whom. Let's focus on right now.
I thrust my hips up, making her bounce a little. She squealed, digging her fingers into my abs in an attempt to hold on.
Good idea, baby.
She lifted her hips, her tightness stroking every inch of my cock. She moved until only the tip was inside her before sliding down just as slowly. I gripped her ass so hard I knew she would be bruised later, but it only made her wetter, her eyes shooting blue flames of pure, unadulterated lust down at me. Ash liked it when I was slow and tender, but she loved it when I was rough. That she was willing to try anything at least once, that she could keep up with me and wanted to experiment, had been what had made our sex life so hot. I was glad to see that hadn't burned out while we had been apart. When I sat up, she wrapped her legs around my back, keeping me from coming out of her. Her still-covered breasts pressed against my chest as she stroked her fingers through my hair before linking them at the base of my neck. I lifted her up, then slammed her back down, causing my balls to slap against her sweet ass. Her head fell back, a sultry moan pouring out of her as her pussy walls tightened around my shaft. "Look at me," I commanded, lifting her on my dick again. She did, her eyes locked with mine.
"Sawyer,"
she whimpered.
"That's right, baby. Say my name just like that."
I lifted her again before slamming her back down. The room was filled with the sound of how wet she was as our bodies slapped together. "Tell the world who's inside you."
"Sawyer!"
She cried louder, and I moved her faster, harder, hitting that spot deep inside of her that I remembered would shoot her over the edge.
"Oh, God."
Her head fell forward, her lips seeking mine.
"I've missed you so much."
"I missed you too."
"You don't know how bad I missed you, baby."
I was mindless with need for her, but that didn't stop my throat from filling with a lump. I kissed her back, pouring all those times I had lain in bed, wishing she was tucked in beside me, into each caress of my lips over hers. It started out as a soft kiss, but like always, it soon left us burning, gasping for air. I didn't know where she ended and I began. It felt like we had become one entity. Needing to feel her come around my cock, dying to pour every drop of release I could already feel fighting for freedom into her, I flipped her onto her stomach. She lifted her ass immediately, already anticipating what was coming next. Red marks from my fingers shined prettily on her creamy skin as I pulled her back against me and entered her roughly. She buried her face into a pillow, muffling her scream as I jackhammered into her at a speed that shouldn't have been humanly possible. The room was filling with the scent of our combined muskiness, the helpless noises coming from her acting as a soundtrack that spurred me higher and higher. She turned her head so she could look at me from over her shoulder.
"I'm coming,"
she groaned half a second before I felt her convulsions begin. Her sweet cream flooded down her thighs as I continued to thrust into her hard. My balls tightened, and I knew it was only a matter of seconds before I would fly into the abyss of pleasure with her.
"Sawyer!"
she screamed.
"Hurry! I need your cum in me."
Her command was the final catalyst, triggering my orgasm. The first shoot of my cum departing me felt like a jolt of pure energy, leaving me and invading her. She moaned as the heat of the proof of my release filled her, her pussy grinding back against me as her inner walls milked every drop from my willing cock. It felt like hours later before I could even breathe right. I had fallen onto my back, pulling her on top of me. Her head was tucked on my chest, her ear pressed to my still pounding heart. Her fingers still had a fine tremble to them, but she was tracing random designs over my waist. We were both covered in sweat, our bodies seeming to have melted together to make one large mass of languid flesh.
"I love you,"
she whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear her, as if she didn't really want me to hear them.
14. Ash. The next day, we picked Jamie up from Terran's and had lunch together in Central Park. Afterward, we went to see a family-friendly movie and spent 2 hours at the arcade, so Sawyer and Jamie could beat the highest score on some zombie game while I watched. That night, both Bran and Men stayed over, Jamie in his room, and Sawyer in mine. The kid didn't seem to think anything about his father sleeping over, which was a good thing, because I wasn't sure how to explain it to him. Honestly, I wasn't even sure how to explain it to myself.
Sawyer had said he loved me, but there had been no talk about what was going to happen next. Were we dating? Or just fooling around again? Bryce knew about us, sure, but there was still one other person who needed to be told. Frankly, I wasn't looking forward to diving into that with Amber anytime soon. Taking Dominic's advice, I decided to just take it day by day. The next week passed in a blur of pleasure-filled, sleepless nights and fun-filled days. We were always together, and it felt like we were a little family when we went out with Jamie or sat on the couch together watching a movie. I enjoyed every second of it, and my heart begged for more. Amber was coming home in 3 days, so I was going to soak up every moment I could, not the least bit sure what was going to happen once she got back. I had just finished popping the popcorn to go with the movie Sawyer was putting into my Blu-ray player when my cell rang with a familiar tone. I almost didn't answer it, but Amber knew Jamie was spending the night with me, and I figured she wanted to talk to her son just as much as she wanted to talk to me. Picking the phone up off the counter where I had tossed it when I had come into the kitchen, I hit connect and lifted it to my ear. "Hey, stranger." "Hi," she greeted happily. "What you doing?" "Getting ready to watch a movie with Jamie. I just finished the popcorn." "Yummy. You make the best popcorn." There was a pause and I heard her say something, but she must have turned her head away from the phone because I couldn't make out what it was. Probably talking to Leo, I suspected. "Is my kid around? I miss him so much." "Hold on a sec." Pressing the receiver to my chest, I called out for Jamie. "Your mom's on the phone, Jamie." Seconds later, his running feet came storming into the kitchen. I held out my cell for him, which he snatched up quickly. "Mommy!" he cried, running back into the living room with the phone to his ear. Shaking my head at all the energy that seemed to just flood off the boy, I finished up in the kitchen, then followed after him a few minutes later. Putting the large bowl of popcorn on the coffee table, I took my place on the couch beside Sawyer. His arm went around me immediately, tucking me into his side. Pressing a kiss to my temple, he hit a few buttons on the remote, and the main menu for the movie popped up on the screen. Jamie was still on the phone, his face full of eagerness as he talked animatedly with his mother.
"And then Dad talked the zookeeper into letting me feed the monkey, and he ate the banana right out of my hand."
He sucked in a deep breath and kept going.
"Aunt Ash freaked out when the hippo ate an entire watermelon. It crushed it with its huge teeth like it was nothing. Juice squirted everywhere. She held on to me real tight because she was afraid I'd fall into the hippo's habitat and get eaten like the watermelon."
I shuddered at the thought of his head getting pulverized by the hippo's jaws, just like the watermelon had been. The zoo had been fun for me up until then. After seeing that beast of an animal eating, I'd been ready to call it a day and bribed both Brannons with the promise of ice cream if we could go home. Sawyer reached an arm across my lap and pulled my legs over his. Keeping his hand on my hip, he nuzzled my ear with his lips. "What's the game plan for when Amber gets home? What are we going to tell her about us?" I chewed on the inside of my cheek, not sure how to answer that extremely loaded question. I hadn't given much thought to what to tell her, because I honestly didn't have a clue what was going on. "Ash?" His voice deepened as he grasped my chin and forced me to lift my head to meet his dark gaze. Gold flecks sparkled down at me, and I couldn't hide the uncertainty that I knew had to be shining like a neon sign from my blue eyes. "I don't know what to tell her," I finally told him, going for honesty. "Why is that?" His tone was gentle, but there was something in his gaze that told me he was on high alert. I shrugged, mostly because I don't know what's going on myself. His hold on my chin tightened, his eyes narrowing. "What's going on is that I love you, and you love me. We're starting our lives together." My heart gave a lurch at those words, but I still didn't know how to respond. "Isn't that what you want?" "Yes," I whispered, the truth of that one little word coming out in a force I couldn't keep out of it. "More than anything." I felt him relax, and only then did I realize he had been holding his breath. "I won't ever let anything come between us again, baby. No more secrets." "Okay." "So, What are we going to tell your best friend?
He tilted my chin up a little more, brushing his lips over mine in a caress that was butterfly soft, yet still had the power to make my pussy flood with need and my blood sing. I still don't know what to say to her, I grumbled, when he kissed a trail from my lips to my jaw, then started nibbling at the sensitive flesh just under my ear. What do you suggest?
Well,
he breathed against my ear, making goosebumps pop up all over my ultra-sensitive body.
We could start with the truth.
That sounds easier than I know it will be. He lifted his head just enough so our gazes locked.
Baby,
I know.
But it's time she knew it all.
Don't you think? I guess so, I muttered, lowering my head to his shoulder.
Hold on, Mommy.
Jamie was right beside me now, and Sawyer's head jerked up when his son thrust my cell between us.
Here, Dad. She wants to talk to you.
Sawyer and I had kissed several times in front of Jamie, but the kid hadn't really questioned it. He had been pretty accepting of the time the three of us had been spending together. Sawyer's brows lifted as he took the phone from his son.
Jamie, go wash your hands before we have popcorn.
Okay, Dad.
He skipped off down the hall to the bathroom, and I sat up straighter as Sawyer lifted the phone to his ear.
Amber?
There was a small pause and I leaned closer, trying to listen in. Hey. I couldn't hear her well enough to hear what emotion was in her voice. How are things going?
He's fine, Amber. We've been hanging out and doing all kinds of fun things over the last few days.
I heard. I thought I heard her laugh, but I couldn't have been sure. Hippos and monkeys, oh my! That's not what I meant. How are things going with Ash? I went completely still at that question, not completely sure I had heard her right. What? Sawyer caught my gaze, grimacing when he saw that I had the whole deer-caught-in-headlights look on my face.
What do you mean?
Oh, please. Did you think Jamie wouldn't tell me?
Tell you what, exactly?
The huff that came over the receiver was audible enough that I was sure I could have heard it from across the room. Dad has been holding Aunt Ash's hand. He kisses her on the lips and the neck. I could picture my best friend rolling her eyes. So? How are things going? Has she given in? Does she forgive you? I gasped at that last part and jumped to my feet, starting to pace. I had been worried about telling Amber everything, but from what I could hear of their conversation, it sounded like she had already known. I didn't know how or when she had found out, but if she had known all this time about me and Sawyer... No, I couldn't think about that. I couldn't believe that my best friend, the girl who was like my soul sister, would betray me like that. There was just no way she could have hooked up with Sawyer, married him, and had his baby while knowing I was in love with him. I hadn't held anything against her because she hadn't known I was with Sawyer back then. But if she, in fact, had known, then it changed everything.
Amber, I think you should talk to Ash.
He stood and pushed the phone into my hands. His face was grim, but he lowered his head to kiss my lips, a soft brushing of his warm mouth over mine.
Don't jump to conclusions,
he urged me.
Let her explain.
I swallowed hard and slowly nodded my head before putting the phone to my ear. Amber? There was a soft sigh in my ear. Hi there. You knew? I whispered, not trusting my voice to speak louder for fear of screaming at her. Not until recently, she rushed to assure me. Between the way Sawyer has been acting lately, and what Jamie told me about how you two have been holding hands and kissing, I finally put it all together. I can't believe how blind I have been all these years. Oh. I felt tears burn my eyes as my anger subsided just as quickly as it had come on. I'm sorry, Amber. You're sorry? Her voice was sharp, but I thought she sounded choked up. Girl, I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be my line. I don't know how you don't hate me, Ash. I'm not so sure I could have been as understanding as you've been over the last 6 years. I screwed up everything. You have to know I never would have done that if I'd known. I was already shaking my head. No, you didn't know. How could you have? Besides, it doesn't matter now.
Let's just leave it in the past where it belongs. A sob-filled laugh filled my ear, and I knew we were okay. There was a reason she was my best friend. We were family, through thick or thin.
I can do that.
But only if you tell me what the hell is going on with you two now. I glanced at Sawyer, who was watching me closely, and wiped a tear from my eye. His face darkened, and I saw him clench his hands as he took his seat on the couch.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Still making him work for it, huh? I can't say I blame you. Make him sweat, babe. Kick him a few times in the balls for me while you're at it. It's not like that. I tried to tell her when I heard Leo talking in the background.
Well, keep me informed, okay?
I kind of have a vested interest in this whole thing, seeing as you might end up being my kid's stepmother and all. My eyes widened at that. I didn't know how to respond. Jamie as my stepson? I couldn't possibly let myself hope for that much. It was still too soon to even think that far into the future. Sawyer and I hadn't lasted past 2 months the last time around. We would need to get a hell of a lot further down the road this time before I could even contemplate marriage. Leo said something else, making Amber huff in exasperation.
I have to go, Ash. Mr. Grumpy is ready to eat, and I still have to find something to wear. Can we have lunch one day when I get back?
I would like that, I assured her, still distracted by her last comment.
Great. I'll see you in a few days. Give Jamie a kiss and a hug for me.
Before I could promise her I would, the phone went quiet in my ear. I dropped the hand still holding the cell to my side, feeling like I had just stepped into some surreal universe where everything was being set to rights in every aspect of my life. I had been freaking out about how to handle Amber just minutes before. Now that was taken care of, and Amber actually seemed like she wanted things to work out for me and her ex. Sawyer and I were together, where we should have been all along. I wasn't going to focus on the past anymore. I was happy now, and that was all that mattered. Jamie came skipping down the hall and jumped onto the couch beside his father, before scooting over to make room between the two of them. My godson patted the cushion.
Sit here, Aunt Ash. Then me and Dad can both sit beside you.
Turning my phone off, I set it on the end table, then picked up the bowl of popcorn before taking the offered seat. As soon as my butt touched the cushion, Sawyer pulled me against his side and Jamie cuddled against me. Both of them dived their greedy hands into the bowl, stuffing their mouths full of the buttered goodness as the opening credits began playing for our movie. Sawyer kissed my temple, his fingers flexing on my thigh. I love you.
I love you too, Aunt Ash,
Jamie told me from my other side, leaning up to press a wet kiss to my cheek. I had to swallow a few times before I could make my throat work. This might not have seemed perfect to some people, but for me, this moment was pure nirvana. I love you both.
Epilogue. Sawyer. The church was packed with over 300 people. Every gossip-hungry socialite in the city had jumped at getting an invitation to the biggest wedding of the century. It had taken over a year, but it looked like Amber was finally getting the wedding she had always wanted. I wasn't sorry that I hadn't been the one to give her this. I was never the right man for the job, so it wouldn't have been right for our wedding to have been more than us going to the courthouse and getting married. No, Leo was the man who her world revolved around, so it was perfectly fitting that he had pulled out all the stops to give her exactly what she wanted. Even not making a big deal out of me, her ex-husband, walking her down the aisle to give her away. As we stood at the back of the church, the double doors closed in front of us as we all waited for the ceremony to begin. I found my hand shaking. While this was Amber's big day, it was an even bigger one for me. I didn't want to fuck it up. I couldn't fuck it up. My life was on the line. Ash was crouched down in front of Jamie, straightening his tie. The simple wine-colored maxi dress she wore gave me a glimpse of her breasts as she shifted a few strands of hair that had fallen from her updo into her face. She was so beautiful that I forgot how to breathe for a moment. Amber tapped me on the arm with her bouquet of white roses. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked in a voice low enough that only I could hear. I had needed Amber's help putting what I had planned into action. After all, I was basically going to take some of the action off of her in a little while. Regardless, she had seemed almost as excited about my plan than her actual wedding, which was saying a hell of a lot considering how much she was dying to marry Leo. I nodded jerkily. I'm just scared out of my mind right now. What if she says no? Amber rolled her eyes, telling me without words that she thought I was an idiot. Why would she? My heart felt like it was going to explode. It was beating so furiously. The question should be, why wouldn't she? Things had been great between me and Ash for the last year. She had been the one to make us take things slow. Otherwise, I probably would have asked her to marry me the minute Amber had gotten back from her vacation. Even though it had driven me crazy, I had let her go at her own pace, not wanting to scare her. Just relax, Amber tried to soothe me. It will all work out, I promise. The wedding planner appeared out of nowhere, giving Ash and Jamie the cue that it was time to begin. The music began to play, and she arranged the pillow in Jamie's hands that held the rings on them. Just like we practiced, she murmured to him, then kissed his cheek. I got this, he assured her with a cocky little grin that reminded me so damn much of myself. She smirked at him and straightened. I know you do, buddy. Once Jamie was in place, she started down the aisle after him. My eyes watched every step she took, loving the sway of her hips in that dress. Amber tapped me a little harder with her roses this time. Do you really want to walk me down the aisle sporting wood? Muttering a curse, I quickly thought of something that would take my mind off the sight of Ash's sexy ass. It took a few seconds, and Amber gave me another eye roll before I could walk without embarrassing her, or hurting myself. Offering her my arm, she linked hers through it, and then we stepped up to the doors as the music changed. It was only then that I felt my ex-wife shiver. Looking down at her, I lifted a brow in silent concern. She gave me a trembling smile. Best day ever, she murmured. I covered her hand on my arm. You deserve this. Her eyes softened. So do you. I hope so. The walk up the aisle felt like it took an eternity, but was oddly over far too soon. No one could keep from seeing how in love the groom was with the bride and vice versa. Seeing the big man who was Leo wiping at his own tears brought a few to my own. It had been a long time coming, but Amber and Leo were finally where they were meant to be. As I handed her over into his safekeeping, then stepped back to take my seat, my gaze went to Ash. There were tears in her eyes as well as she smiled tremblingly at the couple while they said their vows. Now that my job was over, I could focus on what was going to happen next. For months, I had been desperate to find the perfect way to ask Ash to marry me. It was Leo who had come up with the idea, however, to have all the people who loved her front and center to witness my proposal, along with a dozen gossip columnists to scoop up the juiciness of it if Ash turned me down. I wasn't sure if the other man was hoping for that to happen or not, but I had to admit that the idea had been a good one. What better way to finally prove to Ash once and for all that she wasn't my dirty little secret? With Amber's permission and help, I was ready. If my hands would just stop shaking long enough.
Ash. I could barely see the bride and groom as the minister told Leo to kiss Amber. Finally, my best friend was where she had always wanted to be, from the first minute she had met Leo. Beside me, Jamie was practically dancing with excitement that the ceremony was over. This part was boring for him. He was more than ready for the party his mother's wedding reception was going to be. He had made me promise to dance at least one song with him, and that he could have the biggest piece of the cake that he had helped his mother pick out when we had gone to the bakery to taste samples. Ladies and gentlemen, the minister said now as Leo finally, and reluctantly, released his new wife. I give you, for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. Leon Allister. As we had practiced the day before, the organist began playing, but instead of the newlyweds turning to walk back down the aisle together, the couple turned to look at me. Having been in the process of lifting the skirt of my dress so I could make it down the few steps where I'd been standing, I nearly stumbled at finding all eyes on me. Abruptly, the organist stopped, and a new song began to fill the speakers that echoed throughout the entire church.
It was an odd choice for a holy place to play for no reason, was the first thought I had when I recognized the song. Ed Sheeran's Perfect was one of my favorite songs, but I hadn't let myself listen to it in a long time. I had always thought of it as being our song, mine and Sawyer's. Not even over the past year when things had been damn near as close to heaven as real life could possibly get had I listened to it. Startled, I looked over to where Sawyer was supposed to be sitting with my brother and the rest of our friends, but his seat was empty. A firm hand on my wrist pulled me around until I was facing the man in question. As it always did at his touch, my body responded accordingly. I started to melt against him when he shifted away from me without releasing my hand and dropped to one knee. Right there, in front of over 300 people. The world itself could have been watching right then, but suddenly, everyone in the universe disappeared as I saw his chin tremble, while he tried to smile up at me. Tears glazed his brown eyes, making the gold flecks shine all the more. Moreover, I felt the tremors in his fingers that still gripped my wrist. "This is really happening," a voice in the back of my head screamed. "Yes," my heart shouted at the top of its lungs.
7 years ago, I let you go,"
he began in a voice that was choked and just as shaky as his fingers.
"and it was the biggest mistake of my life. But I kneel before you today, offering you everything that I am, the man who will spend the rest of his life, the rest of eternity, showing you just how much he loves you."
My vision went completely blurry as tears spilled down my face. I couldn't even make out much of his face as he lifted my hand to his lips. "Sawyer," I breathed, too choked up to get anything more past the lump in my throat. He rubbed his thumb over my knuckles.
"You stole my heart the first time I kissed you. Now I'm asking you to take my name. Will you marry me?"
A sob pushed past the lump in my throat. "Yes," I cried. "Yes, yes, yes. Please, yes." I felt something cool slide up my ring finger a split second before he was on his feet, pulling me close and crushing me against his chest. I couldn't breathe, but breathing didn't seem all that important right then. I heard a loud thunder of noise from somewhere behind me, but the world itself could have been ending and I wouldn't have cared. "I love you," Sawyer whispered roughly into my ear, and I felt his tears mix with my own on my cheek. "I love you so much, Ash." I couldn't find my voice. Not that I could have spoken with how hard he was holding me. I just soaked up being in his arms, while my heart and mind rejoiced in the sheer happiness that was now my life.
This has been an Audible Studios production of His Dirty Little Secret, Book 1 of His Secret series. Written by Terry Ann Browning, performed by Carly Robbins and Jacob Morgan. Executive producer Anthony Roberts and Mike Charzak. Producer Neil Baksek. Copyright 2017 by Terry Ann Browning. Sound recording copyright 2017 by Audible Inc. Audible Studios is a division of Audible Inc. If you enjoyed this audiobook, be sure to get more books in the His Secret series today.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.